Tonight, you lose everything. Your sight, your hearing, your voice, at 19 months old. And then you spend the next 86 years rebuilding the world from nothing but touch. You are standing at a pump. You don't know what a pump is. You have no word for standing. You have no words at all. You are 6 years old, almost 7, and you exist in a place that is not dark, because you have no concept of dark. It is not silent, because you have no concept of silent. It is nothing. A nothing that stretches in every direction without edges, without time, without you, because there is no you. Not yet. A stranger has your hand. She's been here for weeks now. You know her by the vibration of her footsteps on the porch, by the particular pressure of her grip, by the way she smells like soap and something sharp, like determination has a scent. She has been pressing patterns into your palm, over and over, these strange repetitive motions, and you've been pressing them back because it feels like a game. But you don't understand the game. You can copy the shapes, you can mirror her fingers, but the shapes don't mean anything. They're just movement, empty rhythm. You've been fighting her for weeks. She's stubborn. So are you. Earlier today, there was a tangle over 2 patterns. She kept pressing one shape into your hand and then another, and you kept confounding them, swapping one for the other because what does it matter? They're all just finger wiggling, just nonsense. The frustration built like steam in a kettle. You grabbed a new doll, a gift she'd brought, and smashed it on the floor. You felt the pieces scatter. Good. Something broken to match the feeling inside you. Now, she has your hand again. She's walking you somewhere. You can feel the earth under your bare feet shift from packed dirt to stone. The air changes. It thickens with sweetness, heavy, sticky, alive. You don't know the word honeysuckle. You don't know the word fragrance. But the sensation wraps around you like a warm hand. She stops. She takes your left hand and holds it under something. Cold water rushes over your fingers. A shock, a pleasure, a gush of sensation that runs from your fingertips up through your wrist and into some part of your brain that is waiting for something it doesn't know how to name. And with your left hand under the water, she takes your right hand and begins pressing shapes into your palm. W, A, T, E, R. First slowly, then rapidly. W, A, T, E, R, W, A, T, E, R. And something happens. It rises from somewhere deep, not from your mind, from below your mind. A fragment, a ghost, a sound you once made with your own mouth, 18 months old, standing in a kitchen reaching for a cup. A word you spoke before the silence swallowed everything, before the fever burned the world away, and the fragment and the finger pattern and the cold thing rushing over your hand, they collide. They are the same. This cool, wonderful, rushing thing has a name. Everything has a name. And in that instant, the nothing cracks open. Like an egg, like a sky, you drop to the ground. You slap the earth with your palm. You demand, though you don't have the word demand, to know what this is. She spells in symbols Ground. You reach for the pump. P-U-M-P, the trellis, T-R-E-L-L-I-S. You are spinning, touching everything, your hands frantic, alive in a way they have never been alive. And then you stop. You turn to face this stranger, this woman who has been pressing shapes into your hand for weeks, and you reach up and touch her face, and you ask the question that changes both your lives forever. What are you called? She takes your hand. T-E-A-C-H-E-R. You learn 30 words before the sun goes down. Mother, father, sister, door. The world is pouring into you, and you are drinking it like someone who has been dying of thirst and didn't know the word for water. But here's the thing, no one tells you about this moment. The first emotion you feel, after the wonder, after the flood of understanding, it's not joy. You remember the doll, the one you smashed this morning before you knew what smashing meant. You find the pieces on the floor, and you try to put them back together, and you can't. And for the first time in your life, you feel sorry. Language hasn't just given you words, it has given you a conscience. That night, you lie in your crib. For the first time, you are not just existing, you are remembering a day. And for the first time in 6 years of living, you want tomorrow to come. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. You didn't start here, at this pump, with this teacher, with this word exploding in your mind like a match struck in a dark room. You started somewhere else, somewhere warm and bright and full of sound. And before we can understand what you gained at this pump house in Alabama, we need to understand what you lost. If these stories speak to you, if you find comfort in the lessons found in the quiet corners of history, tap the follow button to join our circle of dreamers and let the next story find you when you need it most. Welcome, Nightlings. This is Huxley. If you like listening or falling asleep to real stories that carry you through history into the minds of those who shaped the world before us, then this is the place for you. Close your eyes and let's remember a life you haven't lived yet. Before we dive in, I want to ask you something. What's something people consistently get wrong about you? Hellen Keller once said that the chief handicap of the blind is not blindness, but the attitude of seeing people toward them. That the real barrier isn't in ourselves. It's in other people's assumptions about what you can and cannot do. I'll go first. The thing people most misunderstand about me is that because I sound calm, I must have it all together. Truth is, calm simply comes from practice and experience. Facing life fears, practicing breathing, meditating. But no one ever has it all together. It's all about finding peace amongst the swings of life, the good and the bad. What about you? What's the thing people consistently get wrong about who you are? Drop it in the comments. I read every single one. Now, settle in, get comfortable, adjust the pillow, let the world outside this room grow quiet. Whatever happened today, the noise, the obligations, the weight of being a person in the world, set it down. You don't need it where we're going. Because tonight, you're not you. Tonight, you're a girl born in Alabama in 1880. And the first thing you need to know is that for the first 19 months of your life, everything was fine. You are born on June 27th, 1880, in Tuscumbia, Alabama. Your home is called Ivy Green, a white frame cottage your grandfather built in 1820, back when the family had money and the world made different promises. Honeysuckle, it's everywhere. It drapes over the well house and winds through the garden and fills the Alabama air with a sweetness so thick you can almost chew it. Years from now, that scent will matter more than you can possibly understand. But tonight, you are a baby, and the honeysuckle is just the smell of home. The house has wooden floorboards that creak in particular places you'll learn to navigate by feel. The garden is a riot of organized chaos. Vegetables on one side, flowers on the other. Fruit trees standing like referees in between. The diet is cornbread and hog meat, and peaches pulled warm from the branch. You can smell the kitchen from the yard. Bacon fat, biscuit dough, the sharp tang of vinegar pickles in the pantry. Well, you can right now. You can smell all of it. You can see all of it. The light through the window. Your mother's face above the crib. The particular blue of a Tuscumbia sky in summer. You can hear your father's boots on the porch. The cicadas winding up their evening chorus. The sound of your own voice making sounds that are starting, already at 6 months, to become words. See, here's the thing about you. You are early. You walk at 1 year old. You start speaking at 6 months, which is ahead of the curve by any standard. By the time you are 1.5 years old, you have a vocabulary of about 12 words. Simple ones. The kind a toddler collects like shiny stones. But one of those words, one of those early, bright, spoken-out-loud words, is wah-wah. Your word for water. Remember that. You're going to need it. You also say tea-tea and wah-wah, and a handful of other syllables that delight your parents and the household and anyone within earshot. Because you are that child. The one who lights up a room. Demanding, curious, grabbing at everything, pulling yourself toward every new sensation with the urgency of someone who suspects, on some deep infant level, that the clock is already ticking. Your family is not small. You have 2 full siblings who will come along, Mildred and Philip. Your father has 2 older sons from his first marriage, James and William, your half-brothers. The household is busy, warm, full of people and animals, and the general productive chaos of a Southern family in the 1880s that is too proud to admit it's no longer rich. And here is a detail that will seem like nothing, or maybe like everything depending on how you feel about the way fate threads itself through a life. One of your ancestors on your father's side, traced back through a Swiss lineage, back to a man named Caspar Keller of Switzerland, was the first teacher for the deaf in Zurich. The first teacher for the deaf. In your bloodline. Generations before you were born. Before anyone could imagine a child like you. Before the word deaf would mean anything personal to this family at all. The seed was there, planted in the family tree like a message no one knew how to read yet. That's the kind of coincidence that makes you wonder whether the universe has a filing system or just a dark sense of humor. You are 19 months old. You are happy. You are speaking. You are walking. You are loved by a family that watches you grow with the particular joy of people who don't know what's coming. The world is bright. The garden smells like honeysuckle and magnolia. Your mother's face is the first thing you see every morning, and the last thing you see before sleep. Your father's voice is a low rumble that means safety. It is February 1882, and then, one morning, you are burning with fever. The fever arrives without warning. One day you're fine, babbling, toddling, reaching for everything with those greedy little hands. The next, you're burning. Your skin is hot to the touch. Your eyes are glassy. You're limp in your mother's arms in a way that stops her heart. Because a limp baby is a wrong baby. And every mother on earth knows this in her bones before she knows it in her mind. The doctor comes to the house. That's how it works in 1882 Alabama. The doctor comes to you. He examines you and gives your parents a diagnosis that sounds like someone threw medical Latin at a wall. Acute congestion of the stomach and brain. Which is the 1880s way of saying something is very wrong, and we don't entirely know what. Modern medicine will later guess at the cause. Bacterial meningitis, most likely, though some have speculated about other culprits. The truth is, nobody is sure. Not then, not now. What is certain is the doctor's private assessment to your parents, delivered in the hallway outside your room in a voice low enough that the household servants pretend not to hear. He doesn't think you're going to survive. Your mother refuses to accept this. Kate Keller is not a woman who accepts things. She holds you through the burning nights, presses cool cloths to your forehead, and bargains with whatever God will listen. The house smells like boiled linen and camphor. Your father paces. The doctor returns. The fever holds and holds and holds. And then, one morning, it breaks. Just like that. As suddenly as it arrived, it leaves, like a guest who overstayed and slipped out before dawn. Your temperature drops. Your body relaxes. Your mother reaches for you, flooded with relief, and she holds you up and looks into your face, expecting to see her daughter looking back at her. You are not looking at her. She moves her hand in front of your eyes. Nothing. She claps right next to your ear. Sharp, loud, a sound that would startle any toddler in the world. Nothing. She claps again, again. She calls your name. She shouts your name. Nothing. The fever left one day as quickly as it had come. But it took something with it. It took everything. Now, here is where I need you to understand something. Not in your mind, but in your body. Because what happens next is not a story about a medical condition. It's a story about what it feels like to be inside a mind when the doors and windows slam shut. You are 19 months old. Yesterday you could see your mother's face. Today you cannot. But you don't know the word yesterday. You don't know the word today. You don't know the word see. You are a toddler. You don't understand that you've lost something. You only understand that the world has changed. That the warm, bright, noisy place you lived in has been replaced by something else. Something that is not dark. Because darkness is a thing you see, and you cannot see anything, not even darkness. Something that is not quiet, because quiet is a thing you hear, and you cannot hear anything, not even silence. It's the absence of the concepts themselves. Try to imagine not darkness, but the absence of the very idea of light. Not silence, but the absence of the very idea of sound. It's not like closing your eyes and plugging your ears. That's simulation. That's pretending. You still know, when your eyes are closed, that there's a world of light behind your eyelids. You still know, when your ears are covered, that sound exists around you. Imagine not knowing. Imagine never having the thought. Imagine that the parts of your brain that would hold those concepts are just empty rooms. That is where you live now. The dozen words you spoke, wah-wah, for water, tea, and all the others, they evaporate. Not slowly, not gradually. They're just gone. One day, you're a talking toddler, and the next you're a silent one. And the gap between those two states is an abyss that nobody in your household can bridge. You still move your lips sometimes, trying to make sounds. Your mouth remembers the shapes. But the sounds don't connect to anything anymore. They float away like smoke. Over the weeks and months that follow, something changes in you. Not all at once, but steadily, like weather shifting. You have emotions, plenty of them. You feel hunger. You feel rage. You feel the warmth of your mother's body when she holds you. You feel desire to touch, to grab, to taste, to understand through the only senses left to you. But here is the cruel part. You have all of these feelings, and you have no name for any of them. No I, no sense of self, no past, no future, just an endless, shapeless now, a state that you will later describe, once you have the language to describe anything, as a no world. You are conscious, but you are not conscious of being conscious. You exist, but you don't know that you exist. It's a distinction that philosophers will argue about for a century after you write those words. But right now, right here, in this cottage in Alabama, it's not philosophy, it's Tuesday. It's every day. It's the only reality you have. You cry. Often. Not the crying of a child who wants something specific, a toy, a cookie, the particular blanket. This is the crying of a creature that feels an enormous pressure inside it and has no valve to release it. You cry because you are full of something. Need, frustration, confusion, the raw animal ache of a mind that is thinking thoughts it cannot express. And the crying is the only sound your body can still make that feels like it matches what's inside. Your mother watches this. Your father watches this. They hold you and rock you and do everything they can think of, and it is not enough. It will never be enough, because what you need is not comfort. What you need is language, and nobody knows that yet. You are 19 months old when the fever takes your senses. You will not get them back. Not the sight, not the hearing. The price of your survival is a kind of solitary confinement that no prison on earth could replicate. Because at least a prisoner knows he's in a cell. You don't even know that. You are sealed inside your own body, and there is no door. The years pass, you grow, and as you grow, the gap between what you feel and what you can express widens into a canyon. You are 2, then 3, then 4. Your body gets bigger, but your world stays small, bounded by touch, taste, smell, the vibration of footsteps on floorboards, the warmth of sunlight through a window. You learn to navigate ivy green by memory. The number of steps from your bedroom to the kitchen? The feel of the porch railing under your palm? The particular creak of the third floorboard near the pantry door? You move through the house with the careful precision of someone mapping a territory they can never see. But the frustration, it builds like pressure behind a dam. Every day, you encounter situations where you need something, a specific thing, a particular piece of food, a person, an explanation for why the world suddenly feels cold or hot or wrong. And you have no way to ask for it. No way to point and name, no way to say I want or I don't want or please or stop. The need for communication becomes so urgent that it erupts daily, sometimes hourly. You cry for no visible reason. You throw things. You slap strangers in the face, not from malice, but from a fury so far beyond your control that your body is the only instrument you have. You wander from plate to plate at mealtimes, grabbing handfuls of food with your fingers, because you can't see where your own plate is, and nobody has found a way to tell you. You eat with your hands because utensils require a kind of coordination that depends on knowing where the food is, and the food is wherever your fingers find it. On your plate, on your father's plate, on the table itself. The household has learned to tolerate this, or rather, they've learned to survive it. Picture it. A formal Southern dinner table, Captain Arthur Keller at the head, the newspaper editor, the Confederate veteran, the man who traces his lineage to a colonial governor, and his toddler daughter is methodically circling the table, grabbing fistfuls of whatever she encounters. Nobody says a word. Nobody can. And here's the thing. No one told you about anger without language. It has no edges. When you can name your anger, when you can think, I am angry because, the naming itself creates a boundary. It gives the feeling shape. Without language, anger is shapeless. It fills you like water fills a glass, all the way to the rim, and then it overflows. It's not temper. It's not defiance. It's a mind screaming through the only instrument it has, the body. You overturn your baby sister Mildred's cradle. You feel the presence of something in it. Something getting attention that used to be yours. Jealousy surges through you, though you don't have a name for jealousy. You don't have a name for anything. You only have the feeling, and the feeling becomes force, and the force tips the cradle, and Mildred nearly falls. Your mother catches her. The household erupts, but what can they do? How do you punish a child who cannot understand the punishment? How do you explain danger to someone who has no word for danger? Some of your relatives have an answer. They whisper it at family gatherings, in the hallway, behind closed doors that you can't hear closing anyway. Institutionalize her. Put her away. There are places for children like her. This is the 1880s. Deaf-blind people go to asylums. This is not cruelty. It is the accepted wisdom of the age. A Massachusetts committee member will later observe that the state has but 2 doors open for her, 4,000 adult blind, the insane asylum and the poorhouse. Those are the options. Dark corridors, the smell of carbolic soap and unwashed bodies, rough institutional bedding, hands that grab rather than communicate, staff that manage rather than teach. Years from now, when deinstitutionalization finally begins, the first residents to leave these places will be unable to count, unable to brush their teeth, unable to recall their own last names. That is what these places do to people, and that is where you are headed, unless something changes. But you, in the middle of all this chaos, you do something extraordinary, something that will later be recognized as the first proof that your mind was never broken, only locked. You make a friend. Her name is Martha Washington. She's the daughter of the family cook, and she's roughly your age. And for reasons that neither of you could explain, because one of you doesn't have words and the other is a child, you understand each other. Together, the two of you invent a language. Not a sophisticated one. Not one with grammar or syntax or anything that a linguist would recognize as structured. But a language. 60 signs. 60 gestures with specific, consistent, repeatable meanings. Shake of the head. No. Nod. Yes. Pull. Come. Push. Go. A particular hand motion for ice cream. Another for bread. You are 6 years old, you are deaf and blind, and you have built something. You have engineered a way to communicate out of pure desperation and the raw material of 2 children's bodies. 60 words. That's more vocabulary than some language learning apps teach you in the first month. And you did it in the dark, in the silence, with no teacher, no method, no textbook, just need. Just the furious, aching need to be understood. Your constant companion through all of this, besides Martha, is a dog. An old setter named Belle. She tolerates your grabbing hands and your tantrums with the patience of a saint, which is good, because the humans in your life are running out of patience, and the relatives are getting louder about the asylum, and your parents are torn between love and exhaustion, and the growing fear that they are watching their daughter disappear into a place where no one can follow. And then, through a chain of coincidences so thin it could snap at any point, something shifts. Your mother, Kate, reads a book. Not just any book. She reads Charles Dickens's American Notes, published decades earlier, which contains a passage about a girl named Laura Bridgman. Laura was deaf-blind like you, and she was educated. Someone figured out how to reach her. If it worked for Laura Bridgman, maybe it could work for you. Kate doesn't hesitate. She contacts a doctor in Baltimore, Dr. J. Julian Chisholm, and makes the journey from Alabama with you in tow. Dr. Chisholm examines you and confirms what your parents already know. Your sight and hearing are gone permanently. But he suggests they visit someone else, a man working with deaf children who might have ideas. A man named Alexander Graham Bell. Yes, that Alexander Graham Bell. The telephone man. But before he was the telephone man, he was a teacher of the deaf. His mother was deaf. His wife was deaf. The telephone itself grew partly from his work on hearing devices. And when your mother brings you to his office, something happens that you will remember for the rest of your life. Bell takes out his pocket watch and makes it chime. You can't hear the chime, but you can feel it. He holds the watch near you, and the vibration hums through your fingertips, and you light up. He understands you. He understands what it means to reach someone through a different sense. You will later write that you loved him at once, that you felt in his presence a mind that knew how to meet yours. Bell directs your parents to Michael and Agnes, the director of the Perkins School for the Blind in Boston. Perkins is where Laura Bridgman was educated. Perkins has experience with children like you. And Agnes reads the letters. He considers his options, and he selects his best recent graduate, a 20-year-old woman, half-blind, an orphan who grew up in a poor house, a woman who could not read or write her own name at 14, a woman who graduated from Perkins as valedictorian against every possible odd, and who has a reputation for being fierce, stubborn, and absolutely impossible to defeat. Her name is Anne Sullivan, and she is on her way. You don't know this. You can't know this. You are 7 years old, and you are running out of time. The relatives are talking about the asylum again. Your tantrums are getting worse. Your parents are exhausted. Martha Washington and your 60 signs are not enough anymore. The dam is about to break. But somewhere in Boston, a stranger has packed a bag. She is boarding a train. She is heading south, toward Alabama, toward a white cottage called Ivy Green, toward a wild child she has never met. She is bringing a doll. She is bringing a suitcase. And she is bringing 26 letters of the alphabet, which she is going to press, one by one, into the palm of your hand until the world opens up. March 3rd, 1887. You feel it before you understand it. The vibration of unfamiliar footsteps on the porch. A new weight, a new rhythm. Someone is here who has not been here before. Now, you won't know this until much later. But the woman walking up the steps to Ivy Green is not what your family expected. They expected a teacher. Someone soft, perhaps. Someone patient. Someone who would look at their wild, unruly, difficult daughter and feel pity and speak gently and tread carefully around the household's habits. Anne Sullivan is none of these things. She is 20 years old. She is partially blind, not deaf, which is a misconception that will follow her for the rest of her life. But she sees the world through a permanent haze, the residue of an eye infection that nearly blinded her as a child. She grew up at the Tewksbury Almshouse in Massachusetts, a poor house, and not the quaint kind. The kind with disease and neglect and children who died in the night and were carried out before breakfast. She arrived at Perkins School for the Blind at 14 years old, unable to read or write her own name. She had never owned a nightgown, never owned a hairbrush. The other students, sheltered daughters of wealthy merchants and prosperous farmers, ridiculed her for her ignorance and her rough manners. She didn't care. Or, if she cared in the way that turns grief into fuel. She had eye operations that partially restored her vision. She studied ferociously. She learned the manual alphabet from Laura Bridgman, the famous deaf-blind woman who was still living at Perkins, a kind of ghost of a prior miracle, and she graduated as valedictorian. She is harder than anyone in your household. She has been forged in a furnace your family cannot even imagine. And she has come to Alabama with a method that will horrify your parents, a temperament that will clash with your father, and a stubbornness that, for the first time in your 7 years, will actually match your own. You don't know any of this. You only know a stranger takes your hand. She presses something into your arms. It's a doll. It's soft. You hold it. Then she takes your other hand and begins pressing patterns into your palm. D. O. L. L. You've felt this kind of thing before. The game. The shapes. You can imitate the finger movements. You're good at imitation, always have been. You press the shapes back into her hand. D-O-L-L. Perfect mirror. Perfect mimic. But you have no idea what it means. The shapes are just shapes. The doll is just a doll. The connection between the finger pattern and the thing in your arms. The idea that one represents the other. That language is a bridge between a symbol and the thing it names. That connection does not exist in your mind. Not yet. Sullivan sees this immediately. She's smart enough and honest enough to recognize that imitation is not comprehension. You can parrot, you can copy, but you don't understand. And understanding is the only thing that matters. What follows is war, not metaphorical war. Actual, physical, exhausting, bruise-leaving war between a 7-year-old who has never been disciplined and a 20-year-old who grew up in a poor house and is not intimidated by anything on earth, least of all a child's tantrum. The breakfast table. This is where the first real battle happens. You do what you always do at meals. You wander from chair to chair, grabbing food from other people's plates with your hands. Your family allows this. They've always allowed it. What else can they do? But Sullivan sits down at this table on her very first morning and refuses to accept it. You reach for her plate. She moves your hand away. You reach again. She moves it again. You reach a third time, and she holds your wrist firmly and will not let go. Your parents are horrified. Your father, Captain Keller, wants to intervene. Your mother's eyes are wide. The household holds its breath. Sullivan locks the dining room door. She sends the family out. And then for the next, well, nobody agrees on how long it took. She and you fight it out. You kick, you pinch, you scream without sound. She holds firm. She insists. You will use a spoon. You will eat from your own plate. You will sit in your own chair. And here's an image to hold. This 20-year-old, half-blind orphan from the poorhouse, sitting at a Confederate veterans' dinner table in Alabama, physically wrestling with his daughter, while the family stands outside the locked door, listening to the chaos. At dinner that evening, Sullivan will argue with Captain Keller about the Civil War and slavery. She is a Northern Irish Catholic in a house full of Southern Protestants. The culture clash is thick enough to cut with a spoon, which at this point is the most contested utensil in the state of Alabama. Sullivan understands something your parents don't. Love without discipline is not love. It's surrender. Your family has been surrendering to your tantrums for 7 years because they love you and don't know what else to do. And the surrender has built a wall around you that is thicker than the darkness and the silence combined. Sullivan is going to tear that wall down. But she can't do it with your family watching, interfering, wincing at every battle. She convinces your parents to let her take you to the small cottage on the ivy green property, just the two of you, alone. A 2-room structure with wooden floors and the smell of wood smoke and Alabama soil. Your parents agree reluctantly, and for the next several weeks, this cottage becomes a kind of laboratory. The experiment. Can language be taught to a mind that has never had it? Sullivan's method is radical for the time. She doesn't use a classroom. She doesn't use a textbook. She doesn't use any elaborate and special systems of education. She has one insight. and it's the insight that will change everything. Babies learn language by being spoken to, not drilled, not lectured, spoken to. A baby hears words all day, at breakfast, during play, while being bathed, while being held. The words wash over the baby like water. There's that word again. And gradually the baby connects the sounds to the things. The sound mama and the warm face above the crib. They fuse. Language is caught, not taught. So Sullivan talks to you. Not with sound, with fingers. She spells into your hand constantly. Everything you touch, everything you do, every moment of every day, she is pressing words into your palm. She follows your interests. If you're playing with clay, she spells C-L-A-Y. If you're petting the dog, she spells D-O-G. She understands that the idea always precedes the word. You already have concepts for the things around you. What you're missing are the labels. But the labels won't stick. You can mimic them. You can memorize the finger shapes. But the leap from finger shape to meaning, the understanding that these patterns are not a game but a code, that each pattern stands for a real thing in the world, that leap will not happen. Day after day, Sullivan spells words into your hand, and day after day, you copy them back without comprehension. The frustration builds, hers and yours. She spells M-U-G into your hand. She spells W-A-T-E-R. You keep swapping them. Mug and water, water and mug. What's the difference? They're both just finger wiggling. The concept that each pattern refers to a different object, that one means the vessel and the other means the liquid inside it, this is the wall you cannot get over. One afternoon the frustration peaks. You grab a new doll that Sullivan brought you, a gift from the students at Perkins, and you smash it on the floor. You feel the porcelain shatter. You feel the pieces scatter under your fingers, and you feel nothing. No remorse, no guilt, no sense that you've destroyed something meaningful. Because without language, there is no moral framework. There is no should and shouldn't. There is only what you feel and what your body does about it. Sullivan sweeps up the pieces. She doesn't scold you. How would she? You wouldn't understand the scolding. Instead, she takes your hand. She leads you outside down the path toward the well house. You can feel the earth change under your feet. Packed dirt to flagstone. The air shifts. It thickens with a smell that you know but cannot name. Honeysuckle. You are walking toward the pump. You don't know what's about to happen. Neither, if we're being honest, does she. Sullivan has tried everything. She has been patient and stubborn and creative and persistent, and none of it has worked. She's not walking you to the well house as part of some master plan. She's walking you there because you were fighting about the difference between mug and water. And maybe, if you feel the actual water on your hand while she spells the word, something will click. Maybe. She doesn't know. Nobody knows. The next 30 seconds will either be the most important moment in the history of education, or just another failed attempt in an endless string of failed attempts. Your feet feel the cool flagstone. The honeysuckle wraps around you. Sullivan positions you at the pump, and the world is about to crack open. April 5th, 1887. You are standing at the well house at Ivy Green. You are 6 years old, nearly 7. The structure is foursquare and open. Draped in honeysuckle that fills the air with a sweetness so heavy it feels like something you could hold. The pump is hand-operated. The water comes from underground, cold even in the Alabama spring. Sullivan takes your left hand and holds it under the spout. She works the pump handle with her free hand. Cold water rushes over your fingers, a shock of sensation clean and sharp, running over your skin like electricity made liquid. And while the water flows over your left hand, she takes your right hand and begins to spell. W-A-T-E-R. First slowly, each letter pressed into your palm with deliberate care. W-A-T-E-R. Then again. Faster. W-A-T-E-R. The letters blurring into a single fluid shape, a word shape, and the cold water is rushing over your other hand, and the two sensations, the finger pattern and the physical thing, are happening at the same time, in the same moment, and something happens. It rises from somewhere deep, not from your mind, because your mind has no filing system for this. From below your mind, from the place where your body stored things before you had a brain that could organize them. A fragment, a ghost of a sound, a vibration your mouth once made, 18 months old, standing in the kitchen, reaching for a cup, your mother's face above you. Wah-wah. Water, the word you spoke before the silence came. And the ghost and the finger pattern and the cold thing flowing over your hand. They collide. They are the same. They are the same. This cool, rushing, wonderful thing has a name, and the name is W-A-T-E-R. Sullivan will later write that the word seemed to startle you, that you dropped the mug and stood as one transfixed, that a new light came into your face. You will later write that you felt a misty consciousness as of something forgotten, a thrill of returning thought, that somehow, in that instant, the mystery of language was revealed. But those are words, and words are what you have after this moment. In this moment, there are no words for what is happening. There is only the sensation of the world splitting open, like a shell cracking, like a dam breaking, like every door in a building being thrown open at once, and behind every door is a room you didn't know existed, and behind every room is another door, and behind that door is another room, and there is no end to the rooms. There is no end to the world. Everything has a name. Everything has a name. You drop to the ground. You slap the earth. You demand to know what this is called. Sullivan spells G-R-O-U-N-D. You touch the pump. P-U-M-P, the trellis. T-R-E-L-L-I-S. You are moving now. Fast, frantic, spinning from object to object with a hunger that is not hunger for food, but hunger for names, for labels, for the code that unlocks the world. You touched the honeysuckle vine. You touched the wooden railing. You touched the stones. Each time you touch something, you turn to Sullivan with your hand outstretched, and the question is so clear it doesn't need words. What is this called? And she tells you, every time, as fast as you can ask. Then you stop. You turn to face this woman, this stranger who has been pressing shapes into your palm for a month, This fierce, stubborn, half-blind orphan from the poorhouse who locked your parents out of their own dining room and fought you over a spoon and dragged you to this pump house on a hunch. You reach up and touch her face, and you ask the question, "What are you called?" She takes your hand. Teacher. Well, not just a teacher, the teacher. The only one you'll ever call by that name. For the rest of your life, when you say teacher, you will mean this woman. Only this woman. Always this woman. All the way back to the house, you are a different creature. Sullivan will write that you were highly excited, learning the name of every object you touched along the path. The flowers, the gate, the steps, your mother, your father, your sister, every person and everything in your world has been living in a fog. And the fog has lifted, and they are all here, solid and nameable and real. In a way they were never real before. You learn 30 new words before the sun goes down. 30 in a single afternoon. Mother, father, sister, teacher, door, table, spoon. The dam has not just cracked, it has been blown to pieces, and the water, there's that word again, always that word, is pouring through. But here is the part that no one expects. The part that transforms this from a story about education into a story about what it means to be human. You remember the doll, the one you smashed this morning before the pump, before the word, before the world cracked open. You remember the pieces on the floor. And now, for the first time, you understand that you broke something. Not just physically. The doll was a gift. It was given to you by students at Perkins, children who made it for you, a child they had never met. Sullivan brought it to you as an offering of connection, and you destroyed it. And you felt nothing, because you couldn't feel anything. Because without language, there is no moral framework. There is no gift. There is no other person's effort. There is no should have and shouldn't have. There is only impulse and response. But now you have language, and with language comes something terrible and beautiful and inescapable. The ability to understand that your actions affect other people. You find the pieces on the floor. You try to put them back together. You can't. They're broken. And for the first time in your life, you feel sorry. The first emotion after understanding is not joy. It is remorse. Think about that for a moment. The very first thing that language gives you, after the flood of names and the ecstasy of comprehension, is the ability to regret. Words don't just label the world. They give you a conscience. They give you a past, because now you can think, I did that, and a future, because now you can think, I should not do that again, and a self, because now there is an I who did the thing and feels bad about it. Language doesn't just name the world. It creates the person who perceives it. Sullivan watches you try to reassemble the broken doll. She doesn't comment. She doesn't say, I told you so. She just watches as a human being is born, because that is what is happening. Not a mind learning words. A self coming into existence. The you that will write 14 books and co-found the ACLU and travel to 39 countries and fight for workers' rights and fall in love and have her heart broken and fly a plane and argue with presidents that you is being assembled right now on the floor of this cottage in Alabama from the pieces of a broken doll and the cool memory of water on a 6-year-old's hand. That night, you lie in your crib, and something is different. You are not just existing. You are thinking. You are replaying the day, turning it over, feeling the shape of it. For the first time, you have a past. The events of this afternoon stored in a mind that now has categories to file them in. And for the first time, you have a future. You lie there, and you feel something you have never felt before. The desire for tomorrow, the want of a new day, with new words, with new names for things you haven't touched yet. You will later write, "I lay in my crib at the close of that eventful day, and lived over the joys it had brought me, and for the first time longed for a new day to come. For the first time longed for a new day. You have been alive for 6 years, and this is the first time you have wanted tomorrow. The numbers that follow are staggering. Within 3 weeks, over 100 words. By the end of August 1887, 625 words. Within 6 months, 575 words, multiplication tables, and Braille. The dam hasn't just broken. It's been washed away entirely, and behind it is a mind that has been waiting, patiently, furiously, desperately, for 6 years. A mind that will never stop being hungry again. And here's the thing about that hunger. It's not just intellectual. It's personal. Every new word is a piece of the world returned to you. Every new name is a door opening. The seeing see little. You will write years from now. They use their eyes, but not their perception. Your darkness is not empty. It is full. The silence and darkness which are said to shut you in actually open your door most hospitably to countless sensations that distract, inform, admonish, and amuse. But all of that is ahead. Tonight, you are 6. You have 30 words, a broken doll you cannot fix, a teacher whose name you now know, and a conscience that is brand new and already aching. You have words now, but words are just the beginning. There's a whole world out there to learn, and you are in a hurry. You are insatiable. That is the only word for what happens after the pump, after the word, after the world cracks open and the names start pouring in. You are a mind that has been starving for 6 years, and now there is food, infinite food everywhere you turn, every object your fingers touch, every texture and temperature and vibration, and you cannot stop eating. Within 3 weeks of the water pump, you know more than 100 words. By the end of August 1887, you know 625. Within 6 months, you have 575 words, multiplication tables, and Braille. You are 7 years old, and you are learning faster than anyone Sullivan has ever seen, faster than anyone at Perkins has documented, faster than the textbooks say is possible for a child your age, let alone a child who spent the first 6 years of her life in a no world with 60 homemade gestures and a rage that could tip cradles. Sullivan sees what's happening, and she leans into it. Her method is beautifully simple, and also, in 1887, borderline radical. She doesn't use a classroom. She doesn't sit you at a desk and drill vocabulary lists into your palm. She takes you outside. Into the garden, into the fields, down to the river, into the kitchen where the cook is kneading dough and the air smells like yeast and flour and the iron tang of the wood stove. Every lesson is tied to something you can touch, smell, feel, hold. If you're playing with mud, she spells M-U-D. If you're holding a flower, she spells F-L-O-W-E-R. If the dog licks your hand, she spells D-O-G before Belle even finishes the lick. She understands something that most teachers of her era do not. The idea always precedes the word. You already have concepts for the things around you. You've had them for years. You know the difference between the cold thing from the pump and the warm thing from the kettle. You know the difference between your mother's hand and your father's. You know the feeling of grass and the feeling of flagstone. What you're missing are the labels. Sullivan is not building your mind from scratch. She is hanging signs on rooms that already exist. And once the signs go up, you start building new rooms. At a pace that borders on frightening, you master the manual alphabet completely within weeks. Braille follows, the raised dots under your fingertips becoming as legible to you as printed text to a sighted child. Sullivan teaches you to use a typewriter by holding your finger to every key and spelling the corresponding letter into your other hand, key by key, letter by letter, until the machine becomes an extension of your mind, and you're typing faster and more accurately than some of the seeing people around you. You start reading, not just in English, French, German, Greek, Latin. 5 languages flowing into your mind through your fingertips, through Braille, through Sullivan's hand, through the raised lettering of embossed books. You are a sponge. You are a bonfire. You are a 7-year-old who missed 6 years of the world and is now trying to swallow it whole. But here is the part that matters more than the vocabulary counts and the language lists. Here is what makes you different from a very good student. You are building a world through senses that other people have forgotten they possess. See, your remaining senses, touch, smell, taste, vibration, are not superhuman. A neurologist named Dr. Frederick Tilney will test you years from now at Columbia University in 1928, and his findings will surprise everyone. Your touch sensitivity? Average. Your sense of smell? Average. Your ability to detect vibration? Average. There is nothing physically remarkable about your sensory apparatus. Nothing. His conclusion: your supremacy is entirely in the realm of the intellect, which means what you are doing is not superhuman perception. It is superhuman attention. You are paying attention to your remaining senses in a way that seeing, hearing people simply do not bother to. They have eyes, so they let their skin go lazy. They have ears, so they let their noses sleep. You don't have that luxury, and the result is a kind of perception that makes other people's experience of the world seem thin. An expert named Piet DeVos will later call it a reorganization of perception. You're not sensing more. You're sensing differently. The inputs from different senses are combining in new ways, creating a map of reality that sighted, hearing people cannot imagine because they've never had to build one from scratch. Take handshakes. You read people through their hands the way sighted people read faces. Except hands, you discover, are more honest. The face can be controlled. People smile when they're angry. They look calm when they're terrified. But the hand? The hand is under no such restraint. And so you shake hands with strangers and you know them. Some hands have sunbeams in them, so that their grasp warms my heart. Others. Well, you write that some people are so empty of joy that when I clasped their frosty fingertips, it seemed as if I were shaking hands with a northeast storm. Some hands are fidgety and unadvised, with nervous, fussy fingers. Some are confident. Some are hiding something. You can read a life in a handshake. How many sighted people can say the same? And then there's smell. Smell for you is not a background sense. It's a primary navigation system. You walk into a house and you can read its history. Several layers of odors, left by a succession of families. You meet a man and know he's a carpenter before he tells you. You meet another and know he works with iron. You describe the scent of a match being struck, and it tells you the lamps are being lit. You identify your friend Mark Twain when you meet him years from now, partly by the tobacco-infused scent that surrounds him like a weather system. He smokes 10 to 20 cigars a day. You can smell every one. And here's one that stops people when you describe it. You can predict storms. Hours before anyone can see a cloud. You feel it as a throb of expectancy, a slight quiver, a concentration in my nostrils. The air changes. The pressure changes. Something gathers in the atmosphere and you feel it before anyone with working eyes can point at the sky and say, rain. You will write, years from now, that the seeing see little, that people with perfect eyes are often blind in their perceptions, that people with perfect ears are often emotionally deaf. You write that you feel as if the very substance of my flesh were so many eyes looking out at will upon a world new created every day. Your body is not missing senses. Your body is a sense. Distributed, attentive, awake in a way that most human bodies have never needed to be. The silence and darkness, you write, which are said to shut me in, actually open my door most hospitably to countless sensations that distract, inform, admonish, and amuse. Read that again. The darkness is not a wall. It is a door. And behind it is a world more vivid than most people ever find, with their eyes wide open. Sullivan takes you to Perkins School for the Blind in Boston in 1888. The school is housed in a converted hotel in South Boston. Students sit in circles. There's a piano in every classroom. A large chiming clock, nicknamed Jonah, under the cupola, and a curriculum that runs virtually around the clock. Teachers room with pupils. Meals are communal. Education doesn't stop when the lesson ends. It seeps into every hour of every day. You thrive. Of course you do. You are 7, then 8, then 9, and the world is expanding like a universe, inflating after a big bang. Every book is a new country. Every conversation is a new door. Every day you go to sleep knowing more than you knew when you woke up, and every morning you wake up hungry for more. You are 9 years old. You have hundreds of words, 5 languages, and a mind that refuses to slow down. And then you hear about a girl in Norway, a deaf-blind girl named Ragnhild Carter, who was taught to speak, you decide immediately. With the same stubbornness that tipped your sister's cradle, with the same ferocity that smashed the doll, with the same hunger that drove you to learn 30 words before sundown on the day the world cracked open, you will speak too. It is 1890. You are 10 years old, and you want the one thing your body seems least equipped to give you. Sound. Your sound coming out of your mouth. Words made of breath and vibration, pushed through lips and shaped by a tongue, launched into the air where other people can catch them without touching your hand. You want to talk. Not fingerspell, not sign. Talk. The way your mother talks, the way strangers on the street talk. The way you talked, once for a few bright months before the fever burned it all away. The inspiration is a girl named Ragnhild Carter. She lives in Norway. She is deaf and blind, like you, and someone taught her to speak. The details reach you through Sullivan's fingers, and the effect is instantaneous. If Ragnhild can speak, you can speak. Where another can go, you can go. This is your philosophy, stated at 10 years old with the certainty of someone who has already rebuilt the world once with her bare hands. Sullivan takes you to the Horace Mann School for the Deaf in Boston. The principal is a woman named Sarah Fuller. She agrees to work with you. What follows is one of the most physically intimate forms of education you will ever experience. Fuller takes your hand and places your fingers on her face, on her lips, on her throat. Then, inside her mouth, you feel the position of her tongue, the shape of her palate, the way her lips press together for certain sounds and part for others, the vibration of her vocal cords through the skin of her throat. You are learning speech the way a sculptor learns form, by touch, by mapping, by feeling the machinery of sound from the inside out. This is the Tadoma method, though it won't be called that for decades. Your fingers on another person's face and throat, reading the physics of language through muscle, and bone and breath. In your first hour with Fuller, you learn 6 elements of speech, MPASTI. 6 sounds, 6 building blocks. To a sighted, hearing child, these are nothing. Sounds they absorbed passively in the crib. To you, each one is a conquered territory. Each one requires mapping the exact position of tongue, lips, jaw, and breath, then replicating it without being able to hear the result. And here's the thing about you. You are not patient about this. You never are. Fuller wants to drill individual sounds. You want words, sentences. You are, in her words, not content to be drilled in single sounds. You want to say mother. You want to say teacher. You want to walk into a room and announce yourself with your own voice, not someone else's fingers. Fuller gives you 11 lessons. 11. That's it. After that, Sullivan takes over, and the rest of your progress comes from what you will describe as habitual imitation and constant practice, which is a polite way of saying you practice obsessively, relentlessly, the way you do everything, with the determination of a person who has been told something is impossible and has taken that as a personal challenge. And you make progress. You do. Your voice emerges, a real, physical human voice, coming from a throat that hasn't produced intelligible speech since you were 19 months old. You can form words. You can construct sentences. You can stand in front of people and speak. But here is the honest truth, and it matters. Your voice is described as low and pleasant to listen to. That's the kind assessment. The full picture is harder. It lacks variety. It runs in a sing-song when reading aloud. There's too much breath and not enough tone. An aspirate quality that makes the words soft and blurred around the edges. You divide syllables in odd places. Love-ed instead of loved. Numbed instead of named. And the hard reality that no one wants to say to your face, but everyone thinks privately, your speech is barely comprehensible to anyone except themselves and Anne Sullivan. Children understand you better than adults. There's something interesting in that, maybe because children listen without expectation, without preconception about how a voice should sound. Adults hear the strangeness and get lost in it. Children hear the words. You are never satisfied. Not at 10, not at 20, not at 50. You will spend your entire life working on your voice, trying to close the gap between what you mean to say and what people hear. The gap never fully closes. Other people can learn to speak by listening. You cannot listen. You are sculpting sound in the dark, trying to create music you can only feel as vibration. And the fact that you produce anything recognizable at all is extraordinary. But extraordinary is not the same as sufficient, and you know the difference. Now here's what I want you to understand about this chapter of your life. It would be easy to frame this as a triumph. Girl who cannot hear learns to speak. Miracle! And it is remarkable. But the truest thing about it is that it's a story about reaching for something with everything you have, and getting close. Close, but not all the way. You reach for speech, and you grasp it, but it's always slightly out of full reach. The words come, but they come imperfect. The voice works, but it doesn't work like other voices. You have a voice now, a real, physical, yours and no one else's voice. But it is a voice that most people cannot understand, and you never stop trying. You never accept the gap. You never shrug and say, well, fingerspelling is enough, because that is not who you are. You are the person who smashes dolls and demands names and learns 30 words in an afternoon and refuses, absolutely refuses, to accept a limit as final. You have a voice, imperfect, sometimes unintelligible, but yours. And you are 10 years old with hundreds of words, 5 languages, a sensory world that sighted people cannot imagine, and a stubbornness that could bend iron. But you are about to learn that brilliance is not armor, that the same extraordinary memory that makes you remarkable can also betray you, and that the adults who praised you loudest can turn on you fastest. You are 11 years old. You have just written a story. You believe it is beautiful. You believe it is yours. The story is called The Frost King. You write it in the autumn of 1891. You are 11. It's a fairy tale about a king who hoards jewels and a rebellion of seasons and the transformation of treasure into something alive. It feels like it came from inside you, the way all good stories feel when they arrive, like they were always there, waiting in some deep chamber of the mind for the moment you had enough words to let them out. You present it as a birthday gift for Michael and Agnes, the director of Perkins School, and Agnes has been your champion. He is the man who sent Sullivan to you. He is the man who opened the doors of Perkins. He is the man who has told the world again and again that you are proof of what the human mind can achieve. He is, in a way you don't fully understand at 11, emotionally invested in your genius. Your brilliance reflects his judgment. Your achievements validate his institution. He reads The Frost King. He is enraptured. He publishes it in the Perkins Alumni Newsletter and calls it Without Parallel in the History of Literature. Without parallel in the history of literature. About a story written by an 11-year-old. Now, if you are an adult reading this, you might already feel a tremor. When someone calls a child's story without parallel in the history of literature, something has gone sideways. Not with the child, with the adult. The praise is too big, too invested, too much weight placed on shoulders too small to hold it. But you are 11. You don't know this. You just know that a man you admire loves your story, and that feels like sunlight. Then someone notices something. The Frost King bears a close resemblance to a story called Frost Fairies, written by a woman named Margaret T. Canby. Not a passing resemblance, not a shared theme. A close, structural, sometimes phrase-level resemblance. The kind that doesn't happen by coincidence. An investigation follows. And here's what they discover. When you were 8 years old, a woman who briefly cared for you, a family friend, finger-spelled Canby's story into your palm. You heard it once. You were 8. You don't remember hearing it. You have no memory of the woman reading it to you. No memory of the story itself, no conscious recollection whatsoever. But your mind, that extraordinary, ravenous, all-consuming mind of yours, captured it, stored it, filed it somewhere beneath consciousness. And 3 years later, when you sat down to write a story of your own, your mind handed you Canby's story wearing a disguise so perfect that you genuinely believed you had invented it. This is not plagiarism. Plagiarism is knowing you are stealing and doing it anyway. This is something stranger and more terrifying. A memory so powerful it can reproduce a text without the owner of the memory knowing the text exists. Your greatest gift, that bottomless capacity for absorption that lets you learn 600 words in 4 months, has betrayed you. The same sponge that soaks up languages and braille, and the names of every flower in the garden, also soaked up Margaret Canby's fairy tale, and wrung it back out as your own. But Anagnos does not see it that way. Or rather, Anagnos is in a bind. He published the story. He called it Without Parallel. His judgment is on trial alongside yours. And so he does what powerful men do when their reputation is at stake. He assembles a tribunal. 8 teachers and staff members from Perkins, plus Anagnos himself. 9 adults in total, seated across from you, an 11-year-old deaf-blind child who communicates through a single person's hand. They interrogate you for 2 hours. Sullivan is not permitted to help you. You must answer their questions through an interpreter, with Sullivan kept away so she cannot be accused of coaching you. They ask you about the nature of memory. They ask you about the origins of ideas. They ask an 11-year-old child to explain the difference between recollection and creation, between something you remembered and something you invented. And you cannot explain it, because you don't know the difference. That's the whole point. That's the horror of it. You believed the story was yours. You still believe the story was yours. You cannot point to the moment when Canby's words entered your mind, because you have no memory of that moment. They are asking you to account for something your conscious mind never participated in. The vote is taken. 4 say you are innocent. 4 say you are guilty. A deadlock. Anagnos casts the deciding vote in your favor, and then he destroys you anyway. Privately, and then less privately, and then publicly. Anagnos declares, Hellen Keller is a living lie. He severs all contact. He never speaks to you again. He never writes. The man who called your work, without parallel in the history of literature, now calls its author a fraud. He erases you from his life as if the water pump, the words, the years of progress at his school were things that happened to someone else. The scandal goes national. Job Williams publishes an article in the American Annals of the Deaf titled, Is Hellen Keller a Fraud? The question hangs in the air like smoke. It will hang there for the next century and a half, in one form or another, all the way to the conspiracy theorists on TikTok who will repeat, in their own crude way, what Anagnos said first. She can't be real. Margaret Canby herself writes to defend you. She commends your intellect. She does not blame you. She understands what happened. The extraordinary memory, the unconscious reproduction, in a way that the tribunal either could not or would not. And then there is Mark Twain. Twain hears about the tribunal and responds with the kind of controlled fury that only a master of language can produce. He calls the proceedings owlishly idiotic and grotesque. He calls the tribunal itself a collection of decayed human turnips. He understands, with the clarity of a writer who has spent his life swimming in the ocean of other people's words, that no thought is entirely original, that all literature is built on everything that came before it, that accusing an 11-year-old of plagiarism for having a good memory is like accusing a river of theft for carrying water that fell as rain somewhere else. A collection of decayed human turnips. Say what you will about Mark Twain. The man knew how to insult people. But none of this saves you. Not Canby's defense, not Twain's fury, not the deadlocked vote, not the fact that you are a child. You fall into a depression that lasts months. You have what the people around you will describe as a nervous breakdown. You are 11 years old, and you have been publicly accused of being a fraud by the man who was supposed to protect you. And something breaks inside you that never fully heals. You never write fiction again. Not as a child, not as an adult, not ever. The story-making part of your mind, the part that reached into the dark and pulled out fairy tales about frost kings and seasons and jewels, that part goes quiet. You write 14 books in your lifetime, and every single one of them is non-fiction. Essays, autobiography, political argument, philosophy. Never another story, never another invented world. The Frost King killed that. Worse, you develop a fear that will shadow you for the rest of your life. A terror of not knowing where other people's words end and yours begin. You have read so voraciously, absorbed so much through your fingertips, that the boundary between what you've learned and what you've thought blurs into something you can never fully trust. Are your ideas your ideas? Or are they echoes of something someone spelled into your hand years ago, dressed in different clothes, wearing a mask of originality? You will never be entirely sure. And that uncertainty, that permanent low-grade hum of self-doubt, is the Frost King's real legacy. You survive this. You always survive. And you have decided something. You will go to college. Not just any college. Radcliffe. The women's annex of Harvard. You are deaf. Blind, and you are the most determined person anyone has ever met. The adults broke something in you, but they did not break everything. Not even close. You want Harvard. They won't have you. Well, let's be specific. They won't consider you. Harvard in 1900 does not admit women, and the question of admitting a deaf-blind woman does not even reach the level of a conversation that requires a formal rejection. Harvard is simply not available to you, in the same way that the color blue is not available to you, or birdsong, or the face of your mother, which is to say, it exists in a world that has decided you don't belong in certain rooms. So you go to Radcliffe, the women's annex, Harvard's smaller, quieter, we don't quite take you as seriously sister. And you go not because Radcliffe is your dream, but because it is the closest thing to your dream that the world will permit. Getting there required a chain of events that, like everything in your life, depended on the right people noticing you at the right time. At 14, you went to the Wright Humason School in New York to improve your speech, then the Cambridge School for Young Ladies in Massachusetts, and then the crucial link, Mark Twain. Twain learned that financial problems might prevent you from attending college. He could not abide this. He was not, generally speaking, a man who intervened in the lives of others. He was too busy being Mark Twain. But something about your situation enraged him. The most remarkable mind of the age, stopped by money. So he wrote to his friend Henry Rogers, the Standard Oil executive. Rogers agreed to pay for your entire education, not a loan, a gift. Because Mark Twain asked, and because sometimes the world works that way. Generosity flows through the strangest channels, from an oil fortune to a deaf-blind girl in Massachusetts, carried by the recommendation of a man famous for writing about a boy on a raft. Fall 1900. You arrive at Radcliffe. You are 20 years old. And the daily reality of your education is something that no college brochure has ever attempted to describe. Sullivan sits beside you in every lecture, every single one. The professor speaks and Sullivan's fingers fly, spelling the words into your palm as fast as humanly possible. She is translating spoken English into fingerspelling in real time at lecture speed for hours each day. Think about the physical toll of that. The cramping in her fingers, the strain on her wrist, the headaches. And that's just the translating. For subjects where textbooks are not available in Braille, and in 1900 most textbooks are not available in Braille, Sullivan reads them to you, by which I mean she reads the textbook with her own weakening eyes, then spells the content into your hand, page by page, chapter by chapter. She is destroying her eyesight for you, slowly, steadily, irreversibly. The woman who arrived at Ivy Green with partial vision is going blind, and the primary cause is the work she does to keep you in school. You know this. You can feel it in the way her fingers slow when she's tired, in the slight tremor that enters her hand at the end of a long reading session. And so you do something that reveals more about who you are than any graduation speech ever could. You lie to her. When she asks if you need a passage reread, you tell her you can recall it. I lied and declared that I could recall them. You protect the person who is destroying herself to protect you. The lie is an act of love so quiet and so costly that neither of you ever speaks of it. The coursework is English composition, the English Bible, governments of America and Europe, Odes of Horace, Latin comedy. Geometry arrives through tactile diagrams made of raised letters and lines. Shapes you trace with your fingers, while Sullivan spells the proofs into your other hand. You type your notes on a regular typewriter. From memory, because you cannot see the page to review what you've written. And then there are the exams. Here is how a deaf-blind woman takes an exam at Radcliffe College in 1902. Sullivan is banned from the room, banned completely. She cannot be present, cannot communicate with you, cannot even be in the building during the test. 2 proctors are assigned, one to proctor you, and one to proctor your proctor. One to proctor Helen, and another to proctor Helen's proctor. The dean pays for the proctors out of his own pocket because the college has no budget line for this particular situation. The bureaucratic absurdity of that sentence should make you smile. One to proctor Helen, another to proctor Helen's proctor. Somewhere in the administrative history of American higher education, someone had to write that policy down, and I hope they pause for a moment to appreciate the strangeness of it. The proctor spells the exam questions into your hand. You spell them back to confirm you understood. Then you write your answers on a Braille typewriter. The clatter of the keys in the silent exam room, the only sound, since you can't hear anything, and neither the proctor nor the proctor's proctor has anything to say. You spend far more time on your studies than any of your classmates. Of course you do. Every piece of information that reaches a sighted, hearing student through passive absorption, the professor's tone of voice, the diagram on the blackboard, the footnote on page 47, has to reach you through a single channel, Sullivan's hand. It is like drinking the ocean through a straw. The water gets there, but it takes longer. And the straw is wearing out. In 1903, while still a student, you publish The Story of My Life. It's serialized first in Ladies' Home Journal, then released as a book. You are 23 years old and already an author. Your passport will list your profession as author. And there's something in that detail that says more than a graduation ceremony ever could. You arrived at Radcliffe as a deaf-blind student. You leave as a writer. June 1904. Graduation Day. You walk across the stage and receive your degree. Bachelor of Arts cum laude. Radcliffe College. The first deaf-blind person in the United States to earn a BA. The first deaf-blind person anywhere in the world, as far as anyone can determine, to graduate from a 4-year college. Cum laude. Not just passing, not just scraping by, with honors. The world calls it a miracle. You call it work. Sullivan calls it nothing, because Sullivan does not talk about what it cost her. She doesn't mention the headaches, or the blurred vision, or the way the letters swim on the page at the end of a long day. She doesn't mention the eyesight she traded for your education. But you know. You always know. You felt it in her hand. The slowing, the tremor, the pauses where pauses didn't used to be. You are a Radcliffe graduate, an author, the most famous woman in America, and you are about to discover that fame does not pay the bills, and that the world you live in is rigged against the people who need help most. Here is where the story most people know about you ends. The water pump, the breakthrough, the education, the triumph, the miracle worker. Curtain falls. Audience goes home feeling warm. Here is where the real story begins. After Radcliffe, you start asking questions, not the questions people expect from the inspirational deaf-blind girl. Not, how do I overcome my limitations? Not, what is the meaning of suffering? Not, can I write another book about how wonderful the world smells? You start asking questions that make powerful people uncomfortable. Questions like, why do people go blind? And the answers you find are ugly. You investigate the causes of blindness in America. You read the reports, you examine the data. And what you discover is this: blindness is not primarily a medical condition. It is a political one. Workers go blind in factories where employers refuse to provide safety equipment because the equipment costs money. Women go blind from diseases contracted in poverty, diseases that could be treated or prevented if the women had access to basic health care, which they don't because they are poor. Babies go blind from infections that could be cured with medicine that exists but is not available to families who cannot afford a doctor. You write that too much of it was traceable to wrong industrial conditions, often caused by the selfishness and greed of employers. You find that poverty drove women to a life of shame that ended in blindness. The blindness isn't the disease, the system is the disease. Blindness is a symptom. This changes everything. This is the moment when Hellen Keller, the miracle child, the water pump girl, the deaf-blind inspiration, transforms into Hellen Keller, the radical. And she does not transform gently. 1909. You join the Socialist Party of America. You are 29 years old. You read Karl Marx in Braille, running your fingers over the raised dots that spell out the critique of capital, the theory of surplus value, the argument that the wealth of nations is built on the labor of the many and hoarded by the few. You read H.G. Wells, William Morris. You read everything you can find about the gap between how the world works and how it should. By 1912, you have published How I Became a Socialist, and you have joined the industrial workers of the world. The IWW, the Wobblies, the most radical labor organization in America, the one that scares factory owners and politicians and polite society, in a way that the Socialist Party does not. You leave the Socialist Party because, in your words, it is too slow. You find it sinking in the political bog. Let's sit with that for a moment. The woman who spent years learning to pronounce individual syllables, who drilled the sounds M-P-A-S-T-I over and over, who knows more about patience and slow progress than almost anyone alive, thinks the socialists are not moving fast enough. The irony is thick enough to spread on toast. Your circle of friends looks like a government watch list, and it is. It literally will be. Eugene Debs, the socialist presidential candidate. Emma Goldman, the anarchist. Big Bill Haywood, leader of the IWW. John Reed, the communist journalist who will write 10 Days That Shook the World. Langston Hughes, Upton Sinclair, Clarence Darrow, Dorothy Parker, the most dangerous thinkers in America, and you are among them, reading their words through your fingertips and signing your letters, yours for the revolution. May it come swiftly, like a shaft sundering the dark. 1915. You co-found Hellen Keller International, an organization dedicated to fighting blindness worldwide. 1920. You co-found the American Civil Liberties Union, the ACLU, one of the most important civil rights organizations in American history, and almost no one knows your name is on the founding documents. You co-found it alongside Jane Addams, Crystal Eastman, Roger Nash Baldwin, Felix Frankfurter. You oppose the United States entry into World War I on the grounds that it serves capitalist interests, not human ones. You support women's suffrage, birth control, workers' rights. You are an early member of the NAACP. In 1916, you donate $100 to the organization and publish in their newspaper the crisis. And here is where the world reveals its most efficient cruelty. The Brooklyn Eagle, a newspaper that has praised you for years, that has called you a Wonder Woman and a modern miracle, publishes an editorial in 1912 suggesting that your political opinions are the unfortunate result of your disabilities, that your embrace of socialism springs from the manifest limitations of your development, that you are blind and deaf and therefore especially liable to error. You read this, and you write back. Your response is one of the most precisely devastating paragraphs in the history of American political writing. You point out that the same editor praised you lavishly when you were advocating for the blind, when you were being the sweet, inspirational, non-threatening version of yourself that makes everyone comfortable. At that time, the compliments he paid me were so generous that I blush to remember them. And now? But now that I have come out for socialism, he reminds me and the public that I am blind and deaf, and especially liable to error. You knew I was blind when you praised me. You knew I was deaf when you called me a miracle. My disability didn't bother you when I was saying things you agreed with. It only became a problem when I started saying things you didn't. This exchange is a perfect machine. It captures, in a few sentences, the way the world treats people whose bodies or minds are different. You are inspiring as long as you are convenient. The moment you become inconvenient, the moment you have opinions that challenge the people in charge, your disability is weaponized against you. Your blindness, which was invisible when you were performing gratitude, suddenly becomes the most important thing about you when you start performing resistance. The same pattern will repeat for the rest of your life. When you advocate for the blind, you are a saint. When you advocate for workers, you are a confused invalid. When you support Braille funding, you are a hero. When you support labor unions, you are a dupe of socialists who are exploiting your limitations. The world has two Helens, the one it loves and the one it fears, and it will never stop trying to replace the real one with the safe one. The FBI opens a file on you. The file is dated July 1st, 1953, though they have been watching you long before that. Reports go directly to J. Edgar Hoover. They track your speeches, your friendships, your writing, your political affiliations. The most famous disabled person in America, surveilled by her own government for the crime of reading Marx in Braille, and believing that workers deserve better than going blind in factories. They never arrest you. This is perhaps the most revealing detail of all. They track you for decades. They file their reports. They note your friendships with communists and socialists and radicals. But they never, ever arrest you. Why? Because you are Hellen Keller. Because arresting the deaf-blind woman who learned to speak at the water pump would be a public relations disaster of such magnitude that not even Hoover's FBI is willing to risk it. Your fame and your disability, the very things the Brooklyn Eagle tried to use against you, become your shield. They cannot touch you. You are too visible, too sympathetic, too known. The absurdity of this should not be lost. The FBI, the most powerful domestic surveillance apparatus in the world, is tracking a deaf-blind woman who reads seditious literature with her fingertips. And their conclusion is, we can't do anything about it because people like her too much. It is the bureaucratic equivalent of a dog chasing a car and catching it. The American Foundation for the Blind, where you will work for over 40 years, has its own version of this problem. Their executive director will privately complain that Hellen Keller's habit of playing around with communists and near-communists has long been a source of embarrassment to her conservative friends. They want your fame. They need your name on their letterhead. But they do not want your politics. They want the water pump Helen, the miracle child, the inspiration. Not the woman who reads Marx and signs her letters, yours for the revolution. And you give them just enough of the safe Helen to keep the partnership alive, because the AFB does real work, work that matters, work that changes laws and saves sight, and gets Braille books funded. You need them. They need you. It is a dance of mutual necessity, and you both know the steps. But you never stop being the other Helen, too, the one with the fire inside. The one who refused to accept that blindness was fate, when it was, in fact, capitalism. The one who looked at the Brooklyn Eagle and said, "You knew I was blind when you praised me." America loved the miracle child. America feared the socialist woman. They were the same person. They were always the same person. You are famous, brilliant, radical, and broke. Your writing does not sell enough. Your lectures do not earn enough. Hollywood makes a film about your life, and it flops. So you make a decision that sounds like a joke, but is not. You are going to join the vaudeville circuit. You are going to stand on a stage in front of audiences who have paid to see the eighth wonder of the world. And you are going to perform because the bills are due. And because you refuse, absolutely refuse, to be diminished. So here you are, a socialist, a radical, a Radcliffe graduate, a best-selling author, and you cannot make rent. It's 1920. The Great War is over. The world is trying to reassemble itself from the wreckage, and you are trying to do the same thing on a much smaller, much more personal scale. Your books sell respectably but not lucratively. Your lectures bring in modest fees, but after you pay Sullivan, after you cover travel, after you keep the household running, there's not much left. You gave your best-earning years to political activism that made powerful enemies and $0. The American Foundation for the Blind hasn't hired you yet. That's still 4 years away. And then there's the film, Deliverance, released in 1919. A Hollywood docudrama about your life. You star in it yourself, playing scenes from your childhood, your education, your awakening. It is earnest, it is well-intentioned, and it is a financial catastrophe. The audiences stay home. The critics are polite in the way people are polite at funerals. The money you expected from it never materializes. What materializes instead is more debt. Andrew Carnegie offers you a pension. This is 1920s philanthropy. A steel magnate extending a hand to America's most famous disabled woman. A gesture of noblesse oblige, so polished you can see your reflection in it. And under normal circumstances, you might have said yes. But you are a socialist. You have spent years arguing that Carnegie's wealth was extracted from the labor of workers who were paid poverty wages while he built libraries with his name on them. Taking his money would be, well, it would be complicated. It would be the kind of compromise that sits in your stomach like a stone. You refuse, on principle. And then later, quietly, when the bills pile high enough that principle starts to look like a luxury you cannot afford, You accept. Because that is what real life looks like when you subtract the mythology. You hold your ideals in one hand and your electricity bill in the other, and eventually one of them gets heavier. But the pension isn't enough. And so you make a decision that on paper sounds like the setup to a joke. The most famous deaf-blind woman in the world is going to become a vaudeville performer. Vaudeville. The circuit of variety shows that crisscrosses America. Acrobats, comedians, magicians, trained dogs, singers, dancers, and the occasional human curiosity. It is entertainment for the masses, lowbrow and proud of it. Played in theatres that smell like cigar smoke, and peanut shells and the particular musk of 1,000 bodies packed into seats designed for 800. The acts rotate. The crowds are loud. The pay, if you're popular, is actually quite good. You are billed as the 8th wonder of the world. And your act is this. You walk onto the stage with Sullivan. 20 minutes, you tell the story of your life. Sullivan translates your speech for the audience, repeating your words in her clear voice so the back rows can hear. There's music. There's staging. And then comes the part the audience actually came for, the Q&A. This is where you come alive. The audience shouts questions. Sullivan fingerspells them into your palm. You answer. And the answers are not what anyone expects. Someone asks if you are happy. You say you are. Someone asks about marriage. You deflect with charm. Someone asks about the bump on your forehead, a prominent feature apparently visible from the cheap seats, and whether it came from a prize fight. You respond without missing a beat. You never fight, except against difficulties. Someone asks what you think about the current political situation. And here's where the 8th wonder of the world becomes the 8th headache of the world for your booking agents. Because you don't give safe answers. You give real answers. You talk about workers' rights. You talk about poverty. You talk about the causes of blindness. You turn a vaudeville stage, a platform built for jugglers and tap dancers, into a political soapbox. And the remarkable thing is that the audiences love it. They came to see a spectacle. They got a mind. Now, here's the thing about the costumes, and I mention this because it reveals something that most biographies breeze past. You dress for these performances, not modestly, not in the simple, respectable attire that a deaf-blind woman is supposed to wear. You wear silk robes, dark evening dresses, full-length fur coats, shiny high-heeled shoes, feathered hats. You are glamorous. You are performing femininity with the same deliberateness that you perform speech. Carefully, consciously, for an audience whose approval you need, but whose expectations you refuse to simply meet. And you do all of this without a mirror. There is a makeup table in your dressing room. There are powders and lipsticks and brushes arranged within reach. But there is no mirror. Why would there be? You cannot see your own face. You have never seen your own face. You dress for other people's eyes because you have no eyes of your own to dress for. Every choice, the silk, the fur, the feathers, the heels, is an act of imagination. You are constructing an image of yourself that you will never perceive, and you are doing it well enough that audiences gasp when you walk out. I felt like a music box with all the play shut up inside me. That's how you describe the urge to perform. A music box. All the play shut up inside. The image is perfect. A small, ornate thing with a song trapped in its mechanism, waiting for someone to turn the key. Vaudeville turns the key. The defiance in this should not be understated. Vaudeville is by design a freak show dressed in sequins. The circuit thrives on novelty. The bearded lady, the strong man, the human curiosity. You know this. You know that a significant portion of your audience has paid money to stare at you, to watch the deaf-blind woman and marvel at the strangeness of it, the same way they'd marvel at a two-headed calf or a man who eats fire. And you take that gaze, that paying, staring, sometimes condescending gaze, and you use it. You answer their questions with the kind of wit that makes the condescension feel foolish. You talk about socialism from a stage that was designed for slapstick. You charge admission to your own exploitation, and then spend 20 minutes making the audience smarter than they were when they sat down. 4 years, 1920 to 1924. You and Sullivan cross the country on the vaudeville circuit, performing in theatres large and small, in cities and towns, for audiences that range from genuinely curious to openly skeptical. It is exhausting. Sullivan's health is declining. Her eyesight, never good, is getting worse. The travel is punishing. The dressing rooms are cold. The schedule is relentless. But the bills get paid, and you refuse, absolutely refuse, to be diminished, even here, especially here. On a vaudeville stage, between the juggler and the trained seals, the eighth wonder of the world holds court. In 1924, the American Foundation for the Blind offers you a formal position, a real salary, meaningful work. The vaudeville years end. You step off the stage and into the next chapter, and the circuit goes on without you, slightly less interesting for your absence. But before the vaudeville years, before the stage lights and the silk robes and the Q&A sessions that doubled as political rallies, something happened. Something you almost never talk about. Something the world barely knows. You fell in love. It is 1916. You are 36 years old, and the world is arranged as it has been for most of your life around the axis of teacher. Sullivan is ill. Tuberculosis has been eating at her for years, and in 1916 it flares badly enough that she cannot work. She cannot sit beside you and translate. She cannot spell the day's letters and meetings and conversations into your palm. For the first time since you were 7 years old, the hand that connects you to the world is too weak to hold yours. A replacement is needed. A temporary secretary to handle correspondence, attend to your schedule, keep the machinery of your public life running while Sullivan recovers. His name is Peter Fagan. He is a former newspaper reporter, late 20s, a fellow socialist. He is smart and earnest, and he knows the manual alphabet, which is the minimum requirement for the job, and, as it turns out, the maximum requirement for your heart. He spells love into your palm, not the word. Well, yes, the word, eventually, but first the feeling. Walks together in the woods outside your home in Wrentham, Massachusetts. The particular quality of his hand, different from Sullivan's, different from your mother's, different from anyone who has ever spelled words into your skin. A warmth in the way he lingers on certain letters, the way his fingers slow down when the conversation turns personal, as if the words are choosing their own pace. You are 36 years old. You have read Shakespeare's sonnets in Braille. You have read poetry in 5 languages. You have written about the beauty of the natural world with a sensitivity that makes sighted people feel they've been sleepwalking through their own lives. But you have never been in love. Not like this. Not the kind that makes you forget for a moment that you are Hellen Keller, the symbol, the icon, the eighth wonder. And remember that you are Helen, just Helen. A woman who wants to be touched by someone who isn't paid to touch her. You call it my little island of joy surrounded by dark water. And here's what I find remarkable about that phrase. Not the joy. Anyone can understand the joy. The dark water. You know, even as you're standing on the island, that the ocean around it is vast and cold and probably rising. You know this is fragile. You know that the world you live in, a world that has opinions about what deaf-blind women should want and who they should want it with, is not going to let you keep this. But you try. You and Peter take out a marriage license. In secret. Because you know what will happen if it becomes public. You know your mother. You know the world. A reporter finds the license, publishes it in the Boston Globe. The news spreads. Your mother arrives with the newspaper. Kate Keller is a complicated woman. She loves you. She has loved you since before the fever. Through the silence, through the wild years, through the tantrums and the smashed dolls and the long, terrifying uncertainty of whether her daughter would ever be reached. She pushed for Sullivan. She fought the relatives who wanted institutionalization. She is not a villain, but she is a product of her time, her class, and her fears. And her fears in 1916 are these. Peter Fagan is a socialist. Peter Fagan is not wealthy. Peter Fagan believes, as you do, in the equality of black and white people. And in Alabama, in 1916, this is not a political position. It is a provocation. And underneath all of that, beneath the politics and the money and the social implications, there is the fear that every parent of a disabled child carries and rarely speaks aloud, that someone is taking advantage, that your love is not real love, but confusion, manipulation, a man exploiting a woman who cannot see his face. She is wrong about that last part, but she is your mother, and she is afraid, and afraid people do not listen well. You deny everything. You sit calmly, brushing your hair, and you tell her it is not true. And here is a detail that breaks the heart a little. You deny it not because you don't love Peter, but because you fear for his safety. You know your family. You know what a Keller man might do to a socialist who is courting his deaf-blind sister. The denial is not cowardice, it is protection, the only kind available to you. Kate casts Peter out. He is dismissed. The engagement is off. The little island of joy begins to sink. But you are not done, and neither is Peter. The first attempt. You make plans to meet in Florida. You'll elope. Start fresh. Build a life away from your mother's fear and your family's disapproval. Kate discovers the plan. Instead of Florida, she takes you to Montgomery, Alabama. Back to family territory. Back to a place where Kellers outnumber socialists by a considerable margin. The second attempt. Peter follows you to Montgomery. He is persistent in the way that love makes people persistent and common sense would advise against. He finds you on the porch of your sister's home. You are together again briefly in the warm Alabama evening, his hand in yours, spelling words that are not about politics or schedules, but about a future. A real future, the two of you together. Your brother-in-law finds them, forces Peter out, at gunpoint. One historian will later describe this period as involving forced midnight train trips out of town, an angry and gun-waving brother, and drama worthy of a bad novel. And it is like a bad novel. Except bad novels let the lovers win in the final chapter. The third attempt. There is a plan. Peter will come for you, or you will wait for him. Accounts differ on the details, and the details are lost to time and memory, and the deliberate silence that your family wraps around this episode like a shroud. What is known is this: someone doesn't show. Or someone does show, but the other is gone. Or the signals get crossed, or the courage fails, or the family intervenes one final time in a way that neither you nor Peter can overcome. It ends. You write about it with the restraint of someone who has learned that some pain is too large for language, even for a woman who fought harder than anyone alive to possess language in the first place. I corresponded with the young man for several months, but my love dream was shattered. That's it. That's all you give the public. My love dream was shattered, as if a dream is what it was, as if dreams are things that break. Peter keeps your photograph for the rest of his life. You are asked years later, in one of those interviews that journalists conduct with the gentle cruelty of people who think personal questions are professional ones, about marriage, about love, about what you want, and you say something so simple and so devastating that it has echoed for a century. If I could see, I would marry first of all. If I could see, not if I could hear, not if I could speak, if I could see. Because what you understand, what the Peter Fagan episode taught you with surgical clarity, is that the world does not object to your deafness or your muteness when it comes to love. It objects to your blindness. It objects to the idea that a woman who cannot see a man's face might choose him freely. It objects to the possibility that love, like language, like perception, like every other human capacity, might not require the senses that everyone assumes it requires. The letters you and Peter exchanged are reportedly destroyed in a house fire in 1946. The physical evidence of the love story, the paper trail, the words he spelled into your hand transcribed onto pages, the proof that this happened, that you were loved and loved in return, gone. As if the universe decided that some stories are meant to exist only in the bodies that lived them. You never marry. You never have another romance that the historical record preserves. The little island of joy remains a single island in a very large sea. And you go on. Because that is what you do. That is what you have always done. You gather what's left and you go on. In 1924, the American Foundation for the Blind gives you a title, an office, and a purpose that will fill the next 4 decades of your life. You are 44 years old, and you're about to become the most effective lobbyist for disability rights that the world has ever seen. A distinction made more remarkable by the fact that you conduct your lobbying through an interpreter in a voice most people cannot understand, with a political record that makes half of Washington nervous. The work is not glamorous. It is committee rooms and legislative hearings and handshakes with the governors and senators who smile for the cameras and then have their aides quietly check whether the deaf-blind woman is still a socialist. She is. She always is. But she has learned, the vaudeville years taught her this, how to give people just enough of the safe Helen to get what she needs. You testify before 13 state legislatures. 13. You sit in hearing rooms and make the case for funding, for services, for the basic recognition that blind people are citizens who deserve something better than the poorhouse or the asylum. Sullivan translates. Your voice fills the room. That imperfect, aspirate, sing-song voice that most people cannot fully understand, but that everyone in the room listens to, because the voice belongs to Hellen Keller. And Hellen Keller is the most famous woman in America. And when the most famous woman in America asks you to fund Braille books, you fund the Braille books. By 1937, commissions for the blind exist in 30 states. 30. When you started, there were almost none. The connection between those two facts is you, your name, your fame, your stubborn insistence on showing up in person, shaking hands, and reading those hands, always reading them. The sunbeams, the northeast storms, the fidgety and unadvised. You secure a $75,000 congressional allocation for Braille books, the first federal funding for Braille in American history. You help ensure that blind people are included as disabled under the Social Security Act of 1935, a classification that sounds bureaucratic and dry until you realize it means the difference between a government safety net and no safety net at all, between survival and the poorhouse door. And then you go abroad. Between 1937 and 1957, you visit 39 countries across 5 continents. You are a one-woman diplomatic mission for disability rights, traveling at an age and a pace that would exhaust a sighted person half your years. Japan in 1937 is transformative. 2 million people come to see you. 2 million. In a country where disability carries a stigma even heavier than in America, where blind and deaf people are hidden away, where the cultural expectations for a woman's silence are absolute. 2 million people come to witness the deaf-blind American woman who will not be silent, will not be hidden, will not accept that the body she was given is the limit of the life she can live. And while you're in Japan, you hear about a dog, an Akita named Hachiko, who waited at a train station for his dead owner every day for 9 years. The story reaches you through Sullivan's fingers and lands directly on your heart. You ask, immediately, with the same urgency you once used, to demand the name of every object at the pump house, if you can have an Akita of your own. The Japanese government obliges. They give you a dog named Kamikaze Go. He dies before he reaches 8 months. You are devastated. If ever there was an angel in fur, it was Kamikaze, you write. And the grief in that sentence is real and uncomplicated in a way that grief for dogs always is. They send a replacement, Kenzan Go. You bring him home. You are, incidentally, the person who introduces the Akita breed to America. The water pump, the ACLU, and now this. Your resume defies categorization. At 75 years old, you embark on a tour of Asia that covers 40,000 miles in 5 months. 75. 40,000 miles. 5 months. These are not the numbers of a woman who is winding down. These are the numbers of someone who has calculated exactly how much world is left to see, through her fingertips, through the vibrations in the floor, through the smell of every new city and the texture of every new hand, and has decided that the answer is more. In June 1946, you fly an airplane. You are 66 years old. You are over the Mediterranean Sea in a Douglas C-54 military transport. Polly Thompson, who has replaced Sullivan as your primary companion, but more on that shortly, presses symbols into your hand to describe the instruments, the altitude, the position of the aircraft relative to the horizon. And then the pilot lets you take the controls. You fly for 20 minutes, hands on the yoke, feeling the aircraft respond to your inputs. The delicate adjustments of pitch and roll transmitted through the control column into your palms. The crew is amazed. Not because you keep the plane level, though you do, but because you can feel it. The same hands that read Shakespeare in Braille and learned speech by touching another woman's tongue are now reading the aerodynamics of a 4-engine transport plane through the vibrations in a metal yoke. Wonderful, you say, to feel the delicate movement of the aircraft through the controls. The absurdity of this moment deserves a beat. A deaf-blind 66-year-old woman is flying a military aircraft over the Mediterranean. The co-pilot is watching her hands on the controls. Polly Thompson is pressing altitude readings into her palm. Somewhere far below, the sea is blue and indifferent, and Hellen Keller is grinning. She is having the time of her life. She has read Marx in Braille, testified before Congress, performed in vaudeville, been surveilled by the FBI, had her heart broken in Alabama, and now she is flying a plane because someone let her, and she is not the kind of person who turns down that invitation. You meet every president from Grover Cleveland to Lyndon Johnson. Your friends include Albert Einstein, Charlie Chaplin, Eleanor Roosevelt, Jawaharlal Nehru, and a list of artists, politicians, and thinkers so long and varied that it reads like someone shuffled together 3 separate address books. Your favorite food is hot dogs. Your secretary bans them from the house on health grounds, and you circumvent this prohibition whenever possible with the same resourcefulness you bring to everything else. Your preferred cocktail is a dry martini. And here is the part that a lesser biography would leave out, but honesty requires. In 1915, you publicly support eugenics. You argue that a human life is sacred only when it may be of some use to itself and to the world. You support the decision to withhold treatment from a disabled infant. You are, in this moment, endorsing the logical endpoint of the same thinking that nearly put you in an asylum as a child. The idea that some lives are worth more than others. That disability is a disqualification from humanity. The irony is so sharp it could cut glass. The woman who proved more than anyone alive that a disabled body can contain a limitless mind is arguing that some disabled lives are not worth living. By 1938, you reverse yourself. You argue passionately for the life of a blind baby whose parents want to let it die. The reversal is complete. You are not the same person at 58 that you were at 35. Nobody is. But the 1915 position is part of your record. And the record does not get to be edited just because the later chapters are more comfortable. You are not one thing. You never were. You are the radical and the performer, the lobbyist and the lover, the socialist and the eugenicist, the woman who reads Marx and drinks martinis and flies planes and holds opinions that contradict each other across the span of a life. You are a human being, the full, complicated, sometimes wrong, always moving kind. The hand that made you is going dark. Sullivan's eyesight has been failing for decades. The same eyes that were damaged in childhood, that were partially restored by surgeries at Perkins, that she strained day after day, year after year, reading textbooks and letters and newspapers and spelling their contents into your palm. Those eyes are shutting down, slowly. the way a lamp dims when the oil runs low. Not all at once, just less and less light, every year, until by 1935 there is no light left at all. She is completely blind. Think about what that means, Sullivan. The woman who bridged your world, and the hearing, seeing world, who sat in every lecture at Radcliffe and translated spoken English into fingerspelling in real time, who read every textbook that wasn't available in Braille with her own weakening eyes and spelled the contents into your hand, page by page, chapter by chapter. That woman can no longer see. The instrument she used to connect you to the world has broken. The cost of your education, of your career, of your life, was her eyesight. And now the bill has come due. 49 years. That is how long she has been with you. Since March 3rd, 1887. The day she walked up the steps of Ivy Green with a doll and 26 letters and a stubbornness that matched your own. 49 years of spelling the world into your hand, of attending every lecture, every meeting, every dinner, every political rally, of fighting with your father about the Civil War, of locking the family out of the dining room so she could teach you to use a spoon, of standing on vaudeville stages and translating your imperfect voice for audiences of strangers, of watching her own marriage collapse. John Macy, the literary critic she married in 1905, left because the marriage could not compete with the gravity of you. Sullivan loved Macy, but she stayed with you. She always stayed with you. Thank God I gave of my life that Helen might live. That is what she says, and it is not self-pity. It is an accounting, a ledger balanced in the only currency she recognizes. Her health declines through the 1930s. The tuberculosis, the blindness, a weariness that settles into her body the way winter settles into old houses, not dramatically, but permanently. The woman who once wrestled a 7-year-old over a spoon, who argued with Confederate veterans, who Mark Twain called the miracle worker, long before the play made the phrase famous, that woman is fading. Twain said it best, as Twain usually did. He called Sullivan a miracle worker, and called you two the most interesting pair since Napoleon and the Duke of Wellington. Except Wellington and Napoleon were trying to destroy each other. You and Sullivan were trying to build each other. The comparison is Twain at his most Twain. Wrong in the details, perfect in the spirit. October 20th, 1936. You are at her bedside. You have been at her bedside for days. Polly Thompson is there too. Thompson, who came aboard as a secretary in 1914, and who has slowly, over 2 decades, become the second most important person in your life. But this moment belongs to you and teacher. Only you and teacher. You are holding her hand. Her hand. The first hand that ever meant anything to you. The hand that spelled WATER at the pump house. The hand that pressed TEACHER into your palm and gave you the word that would become her name. The hand that spelled the entirety of your education into your skin, 1 letter at a time for 49 years. You feel the vibration of her breathing. You have spent your entire life reading the world through vibration. Storms, music, speech, the hum of a moving automobile, the tremor of a train on its tracks. And now you feel her breathing change. The rhythm shifts. Something that was steady becomes unsteady. Something that was present becomes first thin, then thinner, then you reach for her face. You touch it, you feel the stillness, and you know the hand that made you has gone still. I feel that her being is inseparable from my own, you write, and that the footsteps of my life are in hers. All the best of me belongs to her. All the best of me belongs to her. That is not grief. That is a statement of fact so clear and so total that it functions as a kind of architecture. Load-bearing walls, a foundation, a roof. She is not part of your life. She is the structure of your life. And now the structure has a hole in it that nothing and no one can fill. Sullivan is interred at the National Cathedral in Washington, D.C. She is the first woman to be given that honor. It is a recognition that arrives, as recognition often does, slightly too late to matter to the person receiving it. Among her final words, "Then Helen came into my life. I wanted her to love me, and I loved her. I wanted her to love me, and I loved her." Teacher wanted to be loved. Teacher who arrived at Ivy Green as a 20-year-old orphan from the poorhouse, who had never been loved properly in her own childhood, who had survived Tewkesbury and blindness and poverty and ridicule. She wanted to be loved, and she was. For 49 years she was loved by the person she built, by the person whose every word, every thought, every triumph passed through her hand first. Polly Thompson steps into the primary companion role. She is capable, devoted, practical. She will serve you faithfully for the next decades. But she is not teacher. Nobody is teacher. Nobody will ever be teacher. The word in your vocabulary is retired. It belongs to one person, and that person is gone. You go on, because that is what you do. You always go on. But there is a space in your hand now where hers used to be, and it will be there for the rest of your life. Arken Ridge, Eastern Connecticut. A colonial revival house, 12 rooms built in 1938, as a gift from a man named Gustav Pfeiffer, a patron who believed that the woman who fought for everyone else's well-being deserved a home of her own. The name Arkan is Gaelic for teacher, because even the house is a monument to the person you lost. It sits on a wooded hill in the Connecticut countryside. Oriental treasures fill the rooms, gifts from your travels across Asia. Manuscripts line the shelves, personal papers, letters, photographs you cannot see but keep because they are evidence that your life happened, that the people you loved were real, that the moments you cannot remember visually existed in a form that other people can perceive. The front door has a Braille address plate. The house is yours, and it is the first home that is truly yours. Not your parents' house, not a rented apartment, not a lecture circuit hotel room. Yours. November 23rd, 1946. You and Polly Thompson are traveling abroad. The house is empty. A defective oil burner in the basement ignites. The fire starts small. They always do. And then it doesn't stay small. It climbs. It consumes. 12 rooms of books and manuscripts and oriental treasures and personal papers and letters and photographs, and the accumulated physical evidence of 66 years of an extraordinary life. The fire eats all of it. Every page, every artifact, every object you brought home from 39 countries and arranged in rooms you navigated by memory and touch. $50,000 in estimated losses. But that is a number, and numbers do not capture what is actually lost. What is lost is the record, the proof. The manuscript pages you typed on your Braille typewriter, the personal papers that documented your political work, the correspondence that connected you to presidents and poets and socialists and friends, and the letters from Peter Fagan. The letters, reportedly among the items destroyed, are the physical trace of the only love affair you ever had. The words he wrote to you, the words you wrote to him. The paper trail of the little island of joy. Gone. 30 years of careful preservation and a defective oil burner erases it in a single night. The love story's evidence, ash. As if the universe, having already taken the man from you, decided to take the memory of the man as well. Thompson carries the news for hours before telling you. Hours. She knows what this will do. She has watched you navigate loss before. Sullivan's death, Peter's departure, the 1,000 smaller losses that accumulate across a life lived without sight or sound. But this is different. This is not a person leaving. This is the past leaving. The physical past, the one made of paper and ink and objects you could touch and know were real. When she finally tells you, you are silent for a full minute. 60 seconds. In a life defined by communication, by the desperate lifelong project of making yourself understood and understanding others, you choose silence, not because you have nothing to say, because what is there to say? The house burned, the papers burned, the letters burned. No combination of words can reverse combustion. And then you speak. What does it really matter? We still have the house of friendship. The house of friendship. After everything. After the fire took the manuscripts and the letters and the oriental treasures and the photographs and the Braille address plate and the 12 rooms that smelled like your life, you reach for the one thing the fire could not touch. The thing that lives in hands, not in houses. The thing that is spelled into palms, not written on pages. Connection. The house of friendship, the only structure that survives. After everything you have survived, the fever, the darkness, the silence, the Frost King, the vaudeville circuit, the FBI surveillance, the brother-in-law with the gun, the loss of teacher. After all of that, it's a furnace, a malfunctioning oil burner in a Connecticut basement. The universe has, it must be said, a deeply underdeveloped sense of dramatic proportion. The house is rebuilt by October 1947. The architect returns. The structure goes back up. New walls, new roof, new rooms. But the contents do not return. You can rebuild a house. You cannot rebuild what was inside it. The manuscripts, the letters, the treasures, the evidence, these things existed once and exist no longer. They are smoke now. They dispersed into the Connecticut sky on a November night and became part of the atmosphere, which is, if you think about it, almost poetic. Your life's records, scattered into the air, invisible, untouchable, gone in the same way that sound is gone for you, and light is gone for you. Not destroyed exactly, just moved to a place where you cannot reach them. You move back in. You arrange new objects in rooms that have the same dimensions but different contents. You navigate by memory and touch, the way you have always navigated. And you go on, because that is what you do. The house burned, the letters burned, the past burned. You still have your hands. You still have the house of friendship. And the bills, as always, are due. And tomorrow, as always, needs to be met. You go on It starts with a haircut. October 1914. A young Scottish woman named Polly Thompson is sitting in a salon chair in Massachusetts, making small talk with her hairdresser, as one does when a stranger is wielding scissors near your ears. Thompson is 29 years old. She grew up in Glasgow, came to America to visit an uncle, and has no particular plan for what comes next. She is between lives, the way people sometimes are in their late 20s, finished with one thing, not yet started on another, available in the way that only the aimless truly are. The hairdresser mentions a job, a position travelling with a woman named Miss Keller. Secretary work, good pay, interesting circumstances. Polly Thompson has never heard of Hellen Keller. She has never heard of Anne Sullivan. She does not know the manual alphabet. She has no background in disability, education, advocacy, or any of the fields that have defined your existence for the past 3 decades. She is a Scottish woman who came to America to see her uncle and is now receiving career advice from someone holding a comb. She takes the job. It is worth pausing here to appreciate that one of the most consequential partnerships of the 20th century, 46 years of shared life, world travel, political activism, and daily, intimate communication through touch, was brokered by a hairdresser. Not a university, not an employment agency, not the American Foundation for the Blind. A hairdresser. In Massachusetts, while trimming bangs. The great forces of history, it turns out, occasionally operate through salon chairs. Sullivan teaches Thompson the manual alphabet. It takes time. The finger spelling that Sullivan performs with the fluency of a concert pianist is for Thompson a new language, deliberate, halting, each letter a conscious choice rather than an instinct, but she learns. She is diligent in the way that practical people are diligent, without flair or genius but with absolute consistency. She shows up, she spells, she improves, she stays, and she keeps staying. Through the vaudeville years, through the AFB campaigns, through Sullivan's decline and death, through the Peter Fagan crisis, which she witnesses from the sidelines with the particular discomfort of someone who understands both sides and can help neither. Through the world tours and the congressional hearings, and the Japanese crowds and the airplane over the Mediterranean, where it is her hand pressing altitude symbols into your palm while you grip the yoke of a C-54 and grin like a woman who has gotten away with something magnificent. 46 years, just 3 fewer than Sullivan's 49. But here's the thing about being the third person in a legendary partnership. Sullivan and you are welded together in the public imagination. The miracle worker and her miracle, the teacher and the student, the hand and the mind. That bond has its own mythology, its own gravity, its own shelf in the library of great human relationships. And Thompson exists just outside that gravity. Essential, present, indispensable, and somehow always slightly to the side. She knows this. She is not unaware of her position. She has deep respect for your knowledge, as one observer puts it, and she carries out her duties with a competence that borders on invisibility, which is, of course, the highest compliment and the deepest curse of a truly excellent assistant. When she does her job perfectly, no one notices she is doing it at all. The loneliness of that role should not be understated. Thompson is not your teacher. She is not your intellectual equal in the way Sullivan was, or at least she is not perceived that way, which in matters of companionship amounts to the same thing. She is the person who handles logistics. who books the trains and manages the correspondence, and makes sure the hotel room has the right accommodations and translates your speech for audiences who cannot understand it. She is the infrastructure, the wiring behind the walls, the person without whom nothing works and about whom nobody writes biographies. After Sullivan's death in 1936, the full weight of your world shifts onto Thompson's shoulders. She is now the primary hand, the one who spells the morning's news into your palm over breakfast, the one who translates at lectures and meetings and diplomatic receptions, the one who carries the emotional labor of being your connection to everything. Every conversation, every piece of mail, every phone call, every visitor, every sound and sight that you will never directly perceive. She takes you around the world. 39 countries. She is with you in Japan when 2 million people come to see you. She is with you in the bombed hospitals of Europe after the war, where you hold the hands of soldiers who have lost their sight, their hearing, their limbs, and she spells their stories into your palm while you try to find words that are adequate to the suffering and discover, as everyone does, that no words are. She is with you when the fire takes Arken Ridge and everything in it, and she is the one who waits hours before telling you. Carrying the weight of the news inside her chest like a stone she is not ready to set down. She is with you for everything, and she is tired. In 1957, Thompson suffers a severe stroke. She is 72. The damage is significant. It affects her speech, her mobility, the very hand that spells the world into yours. A nurse named Winnie Corbally is hired to help, and gradually, inevitably, the balance shifts. Thompson is still there, still present, still yours. But the hand is weakening. The letters are slower. The connection that has sustained you for 4 decades is thinning, the way a rope thins when too many loads have been hung from it for too many years. March 21st, 1960. Polly Thompson dies. She is 75. You are 80. The second person who spelled the world into your hand is gone. And now there is a fact about the arrangement of the dead that says more than any eulogy. Your ashes, when the time comes, will be placed in St. Joseph's Chapel at the Washington National Cathedral, between Sullivan and Thompson. Teacher on one side, the third musketeer on the other, together in death as in life. 3 women whose lives were so intertwined that even their remains cannot be separated. The architect, the engineer, and the structure they built together, resting in the same quiet stone. 46 years. It started with a hairdresser. It ended in the National Cathedral. And in between, Polly Thompson, the Scottish woman who had never heard of Hellen Keller, who learned the manual alphabet in her late 20s, who was never the miracle worker and never the miracle but was always, always there, gave you everything she had. Which was, it turns out, enough. More than enough. A lifetime. The world is getting quieter now. Not your world. Your world has always been quiet. Or rather, it has always been a different kind of loud, filled with the vibrations and textures and temperatures that serve as your private vocabulary. No, the world around you is getting quieter. The one made of visitors and speeches and committee hearings and airplane rides and the constant, noisy business of being Hellen Keller. October 1961. You are 81 years old. A stroke. Not dramatic, not the kind that fells you instantly, that makes the body collapse like a building with its supports pulled out. This one is subtler, a dimming, a reduction. The energy that carried you through 40,000 miles in 5 months at age 75, that propelled you onto vaudeville stages and into congressional hearing rooms and across the tarmacs of 39 countries. That energy is receding, like a tide going out. Slowly, but with a certainty that does not invite negotiation. You withdraw from public life. Your final public appearance is a visit to President Kennedy at the White House. He is young, vigorous, the kind of energy that fills a room the way sunlight fills a window. You are 81 and moving carefully, and the contrast between you, the young president, and the old warrior is the kind of image that photographers instinctively understand. He greets you warmly. The visit is brief, and then you leave, and you do not return to the public stage. The world, however, does not forget you. The world sends honors. The Presidential Medal of Freedom arrives in 1964, presented by Lyndon Johnson, the nation's highest civilian honor, given to the woman who spent 50 years fighting for the nation's most invisible citizens. You are too frail to attend the ceremony. The medal comes to you. And here's what I find remarkable about the timing. The honors accumulate during your retreat like gifts stacked outside a door you can no longer open. Honorary doctorates from Harvard, the University of Glasgow, the University of Berlin, the University of Delhi. An honorary Academy Award in 1955 for the documentary about your life. The French Legion of Honor. A Nobel Peace Prize nomination back in 1953. The 5th spot on Gallup's most widely admired people of the 20th century, a list that includes you alongside Einstein and Gandhi and Churchill. Company so elevated that the deaf-blind girls from Tuscumbia would have been forgiven for finding it absurd. The world is honoring you, and you are too tired to receive it. The awards arrive at Arken Ridge and take their places on shelves and mantels in a rebuilt house that you navigate by memory, in rooms where the light makes no difference, and the silence is the same silence it has always been. Winnie Corbally is with you now. The nurse hired for Thompson in 1957 has become your final companion. She is kind, capable, devoted in the way that good nurses are devoted, with competence and warmth and the particular patience required to care for someone whose needs are not just physical but communicative, someone for whom every interaction requires a hand and an alphabet and a willingness to spell. But she is not Thompson, and Thompson was not Sullivan. And you have lived long enough to know that the hands change but the need remains. The need for connection, the need for language, the need for someone to press the world into your palm so you can feel it. Your days at Arken Ridge settle into a rhythm. Writing, though less of it now. Gardening, your hands in the soil, feeling the roots and stems and the particular temperature of earth that has been recently watered. Correspondence, though the letters are fewer and shorter. Visitors come, but not as many and not as often. The house that was once a hub of political and intellectual activity is becoming what houses become when their occupants are very old and very tired. A place of routine, of repetition, of small comforts taken at regular intervals. The vibration of the world is growing fainter. Outside your walls, the 1960s are happening. The civil rights movement is marching through the South, through the same South where you grew up, where your family owned a plantation, where the contradictions of American democracy were written into the landscape like geological formations. Freedom Riders, sit-ins, the March on Washington, the Birmingham Jail, the movement you championed for decades. Equality, justice, the insistence that all people deserve dignity regardless of the body they were born into, is erupting across the country with a force that shakes the foundations of everything. And Vietnam, the war you would have opposed, the imperialism you would have named, the suffering you would have insisted the country confront rather than ignore. The world is on fire with the causes you spent your life championing. And you are in a rebuilt house in Connecticut, too ill to participate, too frail to lend your name and your presence to the fight. The activist in you, the socialist, the IWW member, the ACLU co-founder, the woman who told off the Brooklyn Eagle and testified before 13 legislatures, that woman is still in there. But the body that carried her is winding down. Fewer words per day now, fewer visitors, fewer letters. The garden, the chair by the window that lets in warmth you can feel, but light you cannot see. Corbali's hand, the alphabet still, always the alphabet. June 1st, 1968, a Saturday, a few weeks before your 88th birthday. The afternoon is warm. Arken Ridge is quiet in the way that houses are quiet when the person inside them has stopped making demands of the day. You drift off in your sleep. Winnie Corbali is there. The hand that is holding yours is not Sullivan's and not Thompson's, but it is a hand, and it is warm, and it is enough. The room empties. The silence that was never really silence, that was always full of vibration and texture and temperature, and the particular hum of being alive inside a body that perceived the world differently than any body before it. That silence settles. You are still. St. Joseph's Chapel, Washington National Cathedral. Your ashes rest between Anne Sullivan Macy and Polly Thompson. 3 women. A teacher from the Tewkesbury poorhouse, a secretary from a Glasgow salon chair, and the girl who couldn't see or hear or speak and refused to let that be the end of the story. Together. The arrangement says everything that needs to be said. Now, what the world remembers. The water pump. Little Annie Sullivan arrives at Ivy Green, wrestles the wild child into submission, drags her to the pump house, and spells WATER into her hand while cold water runs over the other. The light bulb moment. The breakthrough. The scene that gets staged in school plays and retold in children's books, and performed by Patty Duke on Broadway, and in the film and on every inspirational poster that has ever been tacked to the wall of a special education classroom. It is a real moment. It happened. It matters. But Kim Nielsen, one of your biographers and one of the sharpest, puts it plainly. Focusing on the water pump belittles the life of a woman who lived to be nearly 88. And she is right, because the water pump is the beginning. And you are not a beginning, you are an entire life. What the world forgot. The socialism. The industrial workers of the World Membership Card. The ACLU, which you co-founded. The FBI file that J. Edgar Hoover maintained on you because a deaf-blind woman who believed in economic equality was apparently a national security threat. 14 books, 475 speeches. Marx, read in Braille, understood in full. The vaudeville stage. The hot dogs your secretary banned and you smuggled anyway. The dry martinis. The makeup table without a mirror. The silk robes and feathered hats and high-heeled shoes chosen by a woman who had never seen her own reflection. The gun pointed at the man you loved. The midnight trains. The love dream shattered. the eugenics letter, and the reversal. Because you were wrong, and then you were less wrong. And that trajectory is more human than the plaster saint version the textbooks prefer. The airplane, the Akita, the 2 million people in Japan. And here is the catalogue that belongs in no biography and every biography. You introduced the Akita breed to America. You drank martinis with a preference for them dry. You kept a pistol in your desk drawer at one point. You read Swedenborg and Marx and Shakespeare and detective novels. You swam. You rode horses. You danced. Not well, but with enthusiasm, feeling the rhythm through the floor. You played chess. You were, by multiple accounts, extremely funny. The funniest person in most rooms you entered, which is saying something given that you entered rooms with Mark Twain and Charlie Chaplin. And the hot dogs. I feel the hot dogs deserve their own moment. Here is a woman who dined with kings and presidents, who attended state banquets in a dozen countries, who was served the finest cuisine that diplomatic hospitality could produce. And her favorite food was a hot dog. There is something so magnificently, stubbornly ordinary about that preference. As if, after all the grandeur and the speeches and the honours, what you really wanted was a ballpark franc and for everyone to stop fussing. The world made you a symbol, a poster, a one-sentence story about a girl and a water pump. And here is the uncomfortable question that sits underneath that simplification like a stone under shallow water. How many others were there? How many deaf children, blind children, deaf-blind children were born in 1880, in 1890, in 1900, born with the same capacity you had, the same intelligence, the same stubborn will, and never got an Anne Sullivan? How many were sent to the asylums that your own relatives recommended for you? How many disappeared into institutions where no one spelled anything into their hands, where no one thought to try, where the assumption was that a body without sight or sound was a body without a mind? The answer is thousands, tens of thousands, across centuries and continents. Children who were everything you were, except lucky, except found. You knew this. It is why you worked. It is why the AFB and the 13 legislatures and the 39 countries and the 475 speeches. Not because you wanted to be famous, because you understood, with the clarity that only someone who nearly fell through the cracks can understand, that the cracks are wide, and that most people who fall into them do not come back. The TikTok generation finds you in 2020. The hashtag Hellen Keller accumulates 70 million views. And the dominant theory, 130 years after the water pump, is that you were a fraud. That a deaf-blind person could not possibly have done what you did. That someone else wrote your books, gave your speeches, lived your life while you sat in a chair and performed disability for the cameras. 130 years, 14 books, 49 years with Sullivan, 46 with Thompson, 39 countries, 475 speeches, a Radcliffe degree, congressional testimony, an airplane over the Mediterranean, and the response from a generation raised on screens is, "She must have been faking it." The accusation is not new. It is the same accusation that followed the Frost King when you were 12. The same skepticism that trailed you through Radcliffe. The same doubt that has always clung to you. The suspicion that a body like yours could not contain a mind like yours. That the gap between what they see and what you are is too large to be real. But here is what endures. Not the skeptics, not the conspiracies, not even the awards. The Presidential Medal of Freedom, the Legion of Honor, the Academy Award, The Alabama State Quarter with your face on it. The statue in the United States Capitol where you stand in bronze with your hand on a water pump that represents one moment of an 87-year life. What endures is the hand. Sullivan's hand in yours. Thompson's hand in yours. Peter Fagan's hand in yours. Briefly, on a porch in Alabama, before the gun and the midnight train. Corballi's hand in yours at the end. The hands of soldiers in bombed hospitals. The hands of children in schools for the blind. The hands of presidents and poets and hairdressers and strangers on trains. You read the world through touch. Every person you met, you knew through the texture of their handshake. The sunbeams and the northeast storms, the fidgety and unadvised, the strong and the gentle and the afraid. Your life was a catalogue of hands held and hands released, and hands that spelled love and language and loss into your open palm. You began in silence. You end in silence. Between those silences you built a world from touch. And that world, imperfect, political, contradictory, funny, brave, wrong sometimes, right more often, always reaching, that world is still here. In every Braille book on a library shelf. In every closed-captioned broadcast. In every curb cut and screen reader and interpreter standing beside a podium. In every hand that reaches for another hand in the dark and spells, I am here. You are not alone. The hand remains. Since you made it this far, I'm glad you enjoyed the episode. If you would like to continue listening to episodes with similar themes, I linked them in the description below. You will also find a playlist of our most popular videos. Sleep now, nightlings. And wake up, as always, a little stronger and a little wiser. The story is done, but yours continues.